Okay, so I'm going to call the meeting to order as it is now 5 o'clock. So first of all, we need a completion and acceptance of the agenda. So I need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Commissioner Collier, seconded by Commissioner Little. All those in favor? Any opposition? Thank you, so carried. All right, before we begin, any disclosures of conflicts of interest? Okay, great, thank you. And we're going to move on to the approval of the minutes. Approval of the minutes of the meeting held November 27th, 2024. Everyone should have received a copy. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Commissioner Root, seconded by Commissioner Little. Any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor? Okay, so we have 3 delegations today. First, I am going to call Doug McCray and Sarah Grady, guests from the City of London concerning the Mobility Master Plan.
So staff report number 1 provides an update on the ongoing mobility master plan process. Throughout the process, we have been providing updates to the commission through the quarterly reports. Work is now to a point where public feedback is being sought on the draft networks for each of the modes. Doug McCray, Director of Transportation and Mobility, and Sarah Grady, Traffic and Transportation Engineer from the City of London, have been invited to provide more information on where we are in the process of the mobility master plan, as well as the next steps. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie, and thanks to everyone for having us here today. As we mentioned, I'm Sarah Grady. I'm the Transportation Design Manager for the city, and I also have the pleasure of managing the development of our Mobility Master Plan. It's a large team with members from numerous service areas across the city, of course, LTC. Katie's been a key part of our team, and the Middlesex London Health Team is also part of our team as well. So I will go through the presentation. There is a lot of information on some of these slides. I know it's provided in advance and it's there as a resource after. I won't go everything in detail just for the sake of everyone's time, but happy to answer any questions afterwards. So this slide just kind of gives a bit of a picture of how this is connected with a lot of other initiatives going on within the city. We have the London Plan, which is kind of our blueprint for how we grow as a city. Of course, land use and where we grow, whether going inward and upward or outward, certainly impacts how we serve people from a mobility perspective. Transit in particular, obviously areas that have more dense communities with more people and destinations close together, it's more feasible to serve via transit and more cost efficient. So things like that are very important as we develop this plan. And the Climate Emergency Action Plan was also a key consideration in this process as well. Of course, we're in a climate emergency. In any way we can minimize greenhouse gas emissions, which right now our personal vehicles are the largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. But we can reduce that in conjunction with this plan is certainly a driver as well. And then the third connection there, of course, being the Mobility Master Plan, which we're here to talk about today. And everything we're presenting is based on consultation we've done with the community and technical analysis over the last 2.5 years. One of the reasons this plan is so important right now more than ever is with the significant growth we're facing. As many may know, we're looking at numbers as big as a 50% growth in population coming out of 2050. So very significant. And again, where and how that population growth happens significantly impacts how we move around the city, but it's certainly going to impact the travel demand we feel throughout the network. These are the guiding principles that we developed earlier on in the project. I won't go through them in detail, but they are basically the principles we've used to develop the plan and consider in our decision-making process. We did a lot of consultation on them with the community to confirm that this is aligned with the vision that people would like to see. And they've been used to inform all decisions throughout this process. So what change can lenders expect? One of the things that we also decided in phase 1 is confirmation of a mode share target. And it was developed to both achieve our equity goals, but also consider our equity goals as well. So again, by reducing the number of trips by personal vehicle and increasing the sustainable mode share, we help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But by balancing the modal priorities better like that. It also makes it for a more equitable system, meaning for increasing investment in modes like walking, cycling, and transit, which are more affordable and really just a better option for some people. This has been an overview of the process that went through the development of the network. So again, we confirmed the guiding principles earlier on, developed evaluation criteria based on them. We confirmed our mode share targets, and then what we did with that, we said in our vision for 2050 that we're planning for, we know what the population is anticipated to be, we know what the travel demand is going to be based on that. And then by applying that mode share target, so the percentage of trips by each mode, against those travel demands, it can determine capacity needs for all the corridors and ridership potential there as well. And then we developed some actions and policies, which are being consulted on in conjunction or sorry, in parallel to the networks. So it's programs like providing for cycling, for example, providing more wayfare signage, more bike repair stations, more information on like adequate cycling routes. From a transit perspective, it's prioritizing addressing sidewalk gaps where there's bus stops and things like that. So those really complement the infrastructure recommendations. And then we developed a long list of infrastructure projects, evaluated them based on those guiding principles, looked at them in terms of networks for each mode, and then how they would all integrate together into one. As we develop the recommendations, another key piece of information that we considered is these strategic growth areas. So they're the areas of the city where more intensification is planned. So for higher density and more mixed use. So you'll see these kind of on all the maps in that kind of gray in the background. So those were key considerations where we wanted some of our connections for the transit system. Now it's important, these areas based on the provincial policy statement have to be within the built-up area because they're based on intensification. But it's important to note there's a lot of growth we're seeing certainly around the perimeter of the city as well. Example, in the southwest area of the city, there's significant growth happening down there. Okay, so with that, I will get into the infrastructure recommendations. So what we've done here is we've actually divided the recommendations into 4 different categories, just to make it a little bit easier for people to digest, because it is quite a bit of information. So they're broken up by primary mode, if you will, but it's important to remember every project we've looked at, we've considered how it would benefit all the modes of mobility. So any road project, we've also looked at, does it provide an opportunity to address the sidewalk gap that currently exists or create cycling facilities for their plan. And even the 2 to 4 lane extension, for example, would have a lot of benefits to transit because it's easier for transit to operate, as you folks would know, with by stopping in a curb and having a pull over in a bus bay on a 2-lane road. Just some images of some example types of road projects here. Sorry, I apologize for the screen flickering. The top left, there's an example of some intersection improvements there being a roundabout. The top right is an example of a road extension. That's a section of Bradley that was previously extended. Bottom left is a 2 to 4 lane expansion. So when I'm saying lanes, I'm talking about the whole cross section of the road. And urbanization, adding sidewalks. That's adding things like curb and gutter, sidewalks, illumination, and again, cycling facilities if they're warranted and planned. So this is the draft roads project. I know it's difficult probably to see at this scale up on the screen, but it shows a series of road improvement projects. There's different colors there signifying the different types of road projects. The green is ones that are road improvements. So that's kind of more the urbanizing. So it's maintaining the existing cross section, generally speaking. It's adding curb and gutter, sidewalks, illumination, and cycling facilities if warranted. And it helps improve road safety as well. The blue ones are the 2 to 4 lane expansion projects, which also take advantage of the opportunities to add in those complete street elements that I was referring to there. And then the circles are intersection improvements. So it could be putting a roundabout in, for example. The ones along BMP would be interchanges. And sometimes it's just general intersection improvements. I like a signalized intersection. And the one I skipped over there accidentally is the purple one, which is a road extension project. So Bradley Avenue There's some more phases to that, shown on the slide here. And then this is basically nearly the same map, but it layers in the phasing to it. So a solid line is the near term, so the 10-year horizon, down to 2035. Medium term would be the following 10 years, so 35 to 45. And then the long term, 2045 to 50. And there are actually some beyond 2050 projects that we have flagged on here. We do think they are important to put on the radar. And depending how it grows the city, how the urban growth plan changes, things like that, it's good to have them on there. So, you know, if there's a need to kind of pull them forward in the planning, or certain provincial or federal funding comes available that aligns with these types of projects, we've got them on the books. We also want to note that we didn't consider the movement of goods, the trucking industry and the development as well. So this is not a project recommendation map. It's just a map that was helped to inform the road project recommendation. So this is where we know that there are high volumes of trucks now. We anticipate that they will continue. So one of the many criteria evaluating the roads projects was that also going to help facilitate the trucking movement. It will also be available as a design tool as we move forward. So if you know there's a high volume of trucks, knowing that and potentially increasing the radii in certain locations, you know, it just makes it a lot easier for personal vehicles and larger trucks and buses for that matter to share the road. Okay, moving on to the transit priority network. So we've really tried to make an effort to emphasize to the community that what we're recommending here is infrastructure improvements to help make transit services more reliable and make the travel time more competitive with the vehicles on the road. So it's really about infrastructure improvements. It's not about the routes or where transit stops are going to go. It's about infrastructure improvement. So at the higher category, there's rapid transit. That's where you would have the dedicated transit lines, like we're of course doing as part of our rapid transit corridors under construction, or the ones that are complete as well. The next tier down would be transit priority corridors. That would be more isolated widenings and improvements. So things like queue jump lanes and transit signal priorities. So what exists today on Sarnia Road at Wonderland there, that left turn queue jump lane would be a good example of something like that. And then down from there is the transit friendly corridors. So this would be to a lesser degree those improvements, things like transit signal priorities. So this would kind of align more with what might be good for an express route potentially. Yeah. So here is the draft transit priority network. Again, these are corridor improvements, not routes. The pink, if you will, is the dedicated rapid transit, the highest priority that we're recommending on here. So what we have is a route that goes western Warncliffe up to the North Mobility Hub, and then connects to downtown your Riverside there. We're also recommending the Oxford corridor all the way from Wonderland to Highbury, as well as Wonderland from Fanshawe Park Road down to Southdale. So when I mentioned all of these projects, regardless of what map they're on, we've looked at how they improve all modes of mobility. Wonderland's, you know, a good example. We get a lot of questions about that one by widening from 4 lanes and then adding 2 dedicated transit lanes. You know, and obviously some obvious benefits to transit users. You know, hopefully increases the mode share and transit on that corridor, but it's also going to have a lot of benefits to drivers as well. You know, mitigate them getting stuck behind buses, stop and start, gets the buses out of the traveled lane. Yeah, provides a lot more options for people moving around and that travel time competitiveness. And then this map here again layers on the timing. It is important to note that this timing represents like a shovel in the ground. So again, Wonderland is often a focus because it's there's a lot going on that corridor. It showed as medium term, but that doesn't mean we would finish this project, put this on the shelf for 10 years. We would start work on it right away. There's a lot of studies that we would have to do, of course, TPAP and whatnot to line ourselves with federal provincial funding opportunities. So we'd be starting that right away. And we're also very cognizant of major corridors under construction at the same time, of course. And we're showing Western Warncliffe as the priority as far as those go. Okay, onto the cycling network. We've taken a bit of a different approach with the cycling network, and with the mapping and how we've shown it. There was the 2016 cycling master plan that was done. It had very extensive consultation. It was quite comprehensive. So we looked at that in quite a bit of detail. We are just recommending some tweaks to it essentially. So green is everything that was on the cycling master plan, or that's been approved through other studies and potentially implemented already. But it's the purple in particular, which is new additions to the plan we're proposing. There's even a couple deletions in red. In most cases, representative of a parallel corridor that was since identified that would be preferred for that route. And one thing we're going through right now is the selection process for the facility type. One thing we're certainly keeping in mind is how, if it's an on-street protected cycling lane, for example, how that impacts transit services, even if it's not an existing transit route, you know, that often detours have to happen. So we're taking that into consideration, as well as planning for the cycling protected intersections. We're very aware of how that can impact transit services as well. So those are some of the details we're still working through. And then we've shown the near-term cycling projects, a couple categories shown. Remembering which one's which. With my eyes here, I believe thank you. The purple is the cycling projects, which are, we have a good opportunity to do because there's either a road and transit project already planned there. And then the blue ones are standalone cycling projects. So it's like really key missing links in the cycling corridor that, you know, while there's not a larger project planned in that area, we do want to go in gaps. And again, it's just an example of some of the cycling facility types here. Protected bike lanes, again, these ones that we're very aware of how they can impact transit, cycling tracks, bike boulevards, protected intersections, again, another one that can impact transit operations, shared pathways and the recreational trail as well. We certainly consider the TDP as part of the overall system, but acknowledge that there's some limitations to its use due to some of the winter maintenance limitations from an environmental perspective, but also it's not fully eliminated. And the last network is the pedestrian network. We wanted to make sure the community was aware that this mobility master plan is not looking at the neighborhoods and the residential sidewalks. There's a lot of programs we currently have in place to address those, which are noted on the screen, but through the policies and actions recommended through the MMP, we will take another look at those and see if there's an improvements we can make to those. But the main focus through the MMP has been on sidewalk gaps on major roads. So we've mapped out all the gaps here, whether it's on one side of the road or both sides of the road. And then again, we've layered on the phasing to it with the, so all of the blue shows the phasing. So the solid line being the near term, again, because there's either a transit or a road project plan there. The dash is the medium term, and then the shorter dashes are the long term. The ones in purple are the timelines for them are to be determined. In some cases, they might be roads that are still fairly rural right now, and there is really strong demand for sidewalks yet as far as the priorities go. So the mechanisms and when those get implemented will be determined. In some cases, if there's development happening adjacent to them, for example, along Exeter Road, but there's a lot of development happening just north of there, it's a good opportunity for us to work with the developers and have them implement the sidewalk in those cases. That's just an example of how some of those gaps might get filled. And this is a slide we started doing a bit of our roadshow back in December. So it starts in December when we started our public outreach on this. Started right at the beginning of December. And it goes went all through December. It's been going all through this month. The goal is to get all our feedback. Hopefully, by the end of this month, we'll obviously give this group time to provide feedback to feed into that process. And the goal is that we'll be going back to council in the spring to look for approval of the networks once we refine them based on community input. And then we would go back in the summer with the entire mobility master plan with all those accompanying policies and actions to support the infrastructure. And then following that, mobility master plan implementation would essentially start. There's some things would get further refined in the timing of them through the development charges background study that will follow this. So I believe that's the last, oh, sorry, one more slide. This is just a summary of some of the outreach we've done. It's the 4 public information centers we've done through this month. But there's also been, I think, a dozen pop-up events we've done at various community centers and arenas and other community hubs like that. We also have our online mapping tool where people go in and drop pins like on all the specific recommendations and provide feedback. We've had numerous focus groups and meetings with other interested parties. And I think there's been times when we've had 3 different meetings ongoing at once. We've had to divide and conquer. So we've really made every effort we can to reach as many people as possible to get back on this plan. That's all I have. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for coming and presenting that to us. So what I need is 2 things. First and foremost, I need a mover and a seconder to receive the presentation, moved by Commissioner Collier, seconded by Councilor Ferreira. Thank you. Okay, because this presentation is attached to a staff report, first or second, I need to note and file the staff report. So I need a mover and a seconder for that. Thank you, Commissioner Little, seconded Commissioner Collier. I need comments with respect to the staff report, and they will need to be directed to senior leadership because we don't question delegations, but now would be a good time to have that discussion if there are any comments with that.
I guess I'll jump things off. One, just from a timing perspective, I know that, we have updated windows with respect to OP and things that, in terms of tuning up the running plan, because when you're doing a budgeting exercise or planning exercise, your plan is basically fallacy the day that you hit print, and then you're continuing to update. So question number 1 would be, is there a update mechanism for this, for the horizon of MMP? And I guess second to that is, what is the horizon for MMP? Are we just going out to 2035 in terms of this planning document and it's sort of looking over the hill, or are we actually going fully out to 2050?
So through the chair, the document is going out to 2050, and as Sarah mentioned, there are some projects in there that actually expand beyond the 2050 horizon. There will be a mechanism for reviewing the plan. As we mentioned, a lot of these plans will need to have further studies done. So that will be happening as well as a regular review. I'm not sure that the exact timing of that review has been determined at this point.
Did we do a review like smart moves, like the last mobility plan? Like in terms of sort of like an update to it? Did we physically change the document
I
or?
don't believe we physically changed the document. Yeah.
This is the next, like.
So this is the
This is the next
future
iteration.
Okay.
Right.
So then sort of second line of questioning is, with respect to the near term stuff, how much do we have that already baked into a development charge background study? Because, thinking with my funding hat on, obviously we're going to be dependent on a few things. One, senior levels of government coming through with buckets full of cash, and just sort of realizing the times that we are in, and perhaps recognizing my other part-time gig that I've got going on. Just what the availability of that cash is. And then, then the question is, how much do we think is going to pick up ATC? And then more importantly, how much is actually being put on pressure in terms of capital levy and our ability to carry all of this. So, I mean, it's great that we have this, and I love planning, but if we don't have the kitty, then we're kind of, setting ourselves up for failure.
I can try and take this one for the chair. So my understanding is this plan is going to be used to inform the next DC update. So the plan was get this so that it can be baked into the next DC update. Obviously then your answers to how much of it can be included in DCs and what may, what may require funding from elsewhere, that will be part of that DC update. But the intent is this will inform that.
Sorry, I threw the chair, but so the north and west legs though are like, they're basically already funded in DCs today, right? So there's a placeholder for them, different name. That funding would just get, slid over, sort of the technical term, to whatever project it is that we decide in terms of Wharncliffe and or Oxford West heading out to London, correct?
that would be a brand new project because the funding that was available for the North and West Lights has been reallocated, right? So that would be a brand new
Okay.
project.
So that DC money isn't sitting there.
You know what? I don't know. I mean, Doug may be able to answer that.
I believe it is,
The DC money is.
but it'll likely have to go through the update and new cost estimates.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Allocation and like you mentioned, it's timing is entirely dependent. The next DCI anticipate will assume as the last one did on 2/3 federal funded. It will take time.
I think those are my questions for now, Madam Chair.
Other comments? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much to our guests. We appreciate your presentation.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so we are going to move on to our second delegation, and that is Stevie Roxham, who is the president of Fairy Godparents. Okay, for TPD. Sure, cool.
So good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Stevie Roxham. I'm a non-binary person. I came out as non-binary well into adulthood after having 2 kids with my husband for 10 years. I've had a double mastectomy as part of my gender affirming care. I've also taken testosterone for a short time to lower my voice and then stopped because that's all I needed for my gender affirming care. In my community, I'm a small business owner. I'm also president of a not-for-profit called Fairy Godparents London. You may have heard of us recently as we run our own bus ad campaign with ads that say protect trans kids, trust kids when they tell you who they are. I'm here tonight to address the bus ad campaign run by an organization called the Association for Reform Political Action. This organization is seeking to abolish trans people, healthy sex education, sex work, abortions, and quote, bring a biblical perspective to our civil authorities. Their ad states, put the brakes on medical transition for minors. I know that trans people keep to themselves a lot and you may not even know a trans person, and that's okay. You don't know what you don't know. But I'd like to tell you why this ad is problematic. There are 3 types of transition for trans people. The first is legal transition. This is legally changing your name and your gender marker. Then there's medical transition, which is sex reassignment surgery, which you have to be 18 to access, and top surgery, which in my case was a full mastectomy. You have to be 16 years old to be eligible for top surgery, and in most cases, you have to wait till you're 18. Lastly, there's social transition, and this includes using pronouns that someone has asked you to, a preferred name, getting a haircut, and dressing in a way that makes you feel good about yourself. I know that everyone here can relate to wearing clothes and getting a haircut that makes them feel good. Since medical transition is off limits until at least 16 years old and sex reassignment surgery is off limits until at least 18 years old, I can say with confidence that when we ask you to protect trans kids, we are asking for their right to socially transition. But what about puberty blockers? That's medical transition too. Yes, that's true. Puberty blockers are part of medical transition. When a trans kid starts puberty, the mental anguish that comes with going through a physical body change that is not congruent with how you feel can be very damaging and depressing. This demographic of kids has a very high suicidal ideation rate. The last known study was done in 2021 by the Trevor Project, and 40% of the trans teens that were polled had already attempted suicide. With the transphobic culture we live in now, that number is estimated to be closer to 50%. How can we help these kids? The answer is puberty blockers. The most common puberty blocker is called Lupron. And if you Google Lupron, you'll see that it is used to treat breast cancer, prostate cancer. It's used in vitro fertilization cycles. It's used to treat kids who go through puberty too early. It's used to pause puberty in kids with physical disabilities so their parents don't need to focus on their changing body, but instead on their medical needs. And lastly, it's used to treat trans kids. The method of action for Lupron is that it stops growth and development hormones from being released in your brain. This is why it works for treating cancers as well. These medications have been used to treat precocious puberty for decades. When one stops taking Lupron, growth and development hormones are released in the brain again in puberty, or growth and development resumes. Now, Lupron is only meant to be used for 2 years at most. but that 2 years is enough time for a trans kiddo to explore their gender identity. 2 years of time to figure out what's next for them in terms of transition, or if they want to change their mind. So what does this have to do with that bus ad? Put the brakes on medical transition for minors. The only medical transition that these kids have access to is puberty blockers, which they can access for 2 years to determine if they want to pursue hormone replacement therapy. The regret rate for a knee replacement in Canada is 12%. Gender affirming care has less than 1% regret rate. And the biggest reason that trans kids detransition is their safety or societal pressure. This ad contributes to a terrible culture of disinformation surrounding trans people and is incredibly dangerous for my community. I'd like to call your attention to the city of Hamilton, where on July 6, 2023, the city declined to run a transphobic ad on bus shelters due to the negative impact it would have on the trans community. The ad was put forward by the Christian Heritage Party of Canada. The CHP challenged the decision on the basis that it infringed on their right to freedom of expression. This past fall, the decision was upheld in Ontario Superior Court, was upheld by Ontario Superior Court Justice Jamie Trimble, who said that the city of Hamilton had done the right thing to maintain a safe transit system for all trans people. And on October 28, 2024, the case was dismissed entirely. A lot of trans folks use the transit system. I sincerely encourage you to do the right thing by removing the bus ad and apologizing to the trans community of London. I urge you to learn about trans people and embrace inclusion and acceptance. It was supposed to be added to your agenda this evening, my Trans 101 talk, but I'd like to offer to do my Trans 101 talk for this board of directors for free. I hope you choose to do the right thing. The power is yours to be safe spaces for the trans community. Thank you.
Thank you. First, I need a mover and a seconder to receive the presentation. Moved by Commissioner Collier, seconded by Commissioner Reid. Thank you very much. And then I also need a mover and a seconder to receive the communication associated with this presentation that was in the agenda as well. Moved by Commissioner, seconded by Councilor Clara. On to delegation number 3, I ask Councilor Crossour to please approach for his presentation.
Thank you very much. My name is Sam Trosso. I am a London City Councillor, but I want to stress that I'm here on my own tonight. This is not direction of the council. I'm here speaking for myself. I also am a professor emeritus in the Faculty of Law and at the Faculty of Information and Media Studies. So I do believe I have some background in some of the constitutional matters that I'm going to talk to you about. I previously in December submitted a letter to you that outlined my concerns, about the running of these bus ads, which I was very clear in that message that I believe that you have got fundamentally a very sound and very, very logical, very legally useful framework for your ad policy. And I think under the ad policy, these ads should not have been accepted. And one of the things I'm asking you to do tonight is fundamentally, I would like you to vote the ads because I don't think they're warranted. And I think they're doing exceptional harm to the community. Buses are very, very sensitive because people are getting on the buses to go to school. I just think that it sends the wrong message to have these types of really, I think, hurtful ads on our buses. It's a poor reflection of London and it's a poor reflection of this system. Now, the previous speaker previously, she talked about the Hamilton case a little bit. And I want to talk about the Hamilton case because I think there's a perception with some people in the community that because something involves expression, it's necessarily protected absolutely by Section 2B of the Charter. And it's not. Because charter analysis in Canada involves an interplay between the protected right and other rights. For example, the Equal Protection Clause of Section 50, or human rights legislation, or other practices. And I think when an agency gets these acts, there needs to be a protocol for flagging an ad that could be potentially controversial. Now, this ad came in, this broke publicly in December. At the time that ad came in, there should have been further review. There's something in report number 7 that says there was, but I don't think that it really goes into enough detail to explain what that protocol for reviewing that decision was. As bad as the decision was to accept those ads in December, I think the decision in January to renew those ads was much worse. Because at that time, it was very clear to everyone who was following this issue that there was substantial controversy in the community. You had received letters from many, many people, including myself. You also, there was also the subject of extensive media, media discussion. This commission, like the Hamilton Board, is under an obligation when you have a controversial issue where different values and different interests and different rights clash. You have an affirmative obligation to engage in a balancing test. And that is right in the unless clause of your ad policy. You failed to do that. Now, I don't know if this was discussed in a closed session or not. I'm not even gonna ask because it's not something I would get to know. But I would think that the board at this level would have reviewed something like that and it would not have been done administratively. So, how much time do I have left?
1 minute.
Okay, so.
And I
at-
just
at
want
one-
to take, I just want to take a moment, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I think we just want to watch referring to people because the previous speaker does identify as the he. So we just want to be.
I'm very
careful
sorry and
how we're referring to
I do
people.
apologize for that.
Okay.
I do apologize for that. The point I wanted to make was, my strong agreement with the substantive points that were made and, my gratitude for, raising the Hamilton case, which the Hamilton case, is controlling here. And it was not mentioned in, staff report 7. So, in closing, I do want to thank you for giving me the chance to speak and, reiterate, I'm speaking, for myself. I'm asking you to do the following things. Number 1, clarify the protocols to be used when an ad order is received, when there is a question regarding compliance with the ad policy, which I think is present here. How is it followed in the current situation, both with respect to the original ad and the renewal? Now, I think you need to have a further discussion at this board in public, perhaps after a public participation meeting, with respect to whether the ads in question comply with the ad policy, including whether this unless criteria are present. I believe they are. I think that under section 1 of the charter, notwithstanding section 2, I shouldn't use the word notwithstanding. This is not the notwithstanding clause. This is just garden variety section 1 analysis that is always done. I think you need to look at whether or not circumstances are present that would create a legitimate, substantial justification for departing from a strict application of section 2. And also, along with that, whether there is a less restrictive alternative to pulling the ads. You need to consider the harm that is being done to the community by leaving the ads up. With respect to report number 7, I think its failure to include any discussion of the Hamilton case leads me to think that it needs to be sent back for a little bit more analysis. So rather than just accept it, I do think you need some more analysis. Whether you've received a legal opinion, I don't know, but I also want to see the board provide further development of the protocol and procedures to be followed upon receipt of a potentially problematic ad. And that pending the analysis of these above points, the ads in issue be removed from display from the LTC buses. And I'd be very happy to take any questions that members here might have.
We don't have a question and answer period for delegations, but I do thank you for coming to present today and providing your comments.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I need a mover and a seconder to receive the presentation. Moved by Commissioner Little, seconded by Commissioner Collier. And then we also do have a communication that goes with that presentation, so I need a mover and a seconder for that as well. Commissioner Madden, thank you, seconded by Commissioner Reed. Okay, so we also have two additional communications that we need to deal with. So we're going to start with communication number 2, which is a letter from ANOVA dated January 15th, 2025. Everyone should have received a copy of that letter. So first, I need to move into seconder to note and file. Moved by Commissioner Madden, thank you. Seconded by. Any discussion? Seeing none, any opposed? Great. And on to the last communication that we have a letter from Councillor Pelosa from Ward 12 dated January 22nd, 2025, and this is regarding the 2025 service plan and is also connected to staff report number 2. I need a mover and a seconder for that. Commissioner Little, thank you very much. Seconded by Commissioner Ridge. I'm going to hold the discussion for that for the moment because I want to let Ms. Burns present her staff report, and then we'll deal with any discussion with respect to that communication alongside the staff report. Okay.
Right. Staff report number 2 sets out the recommended service changes as part of the 2025 service plan. As has been the case over the past number of years, the focus of the 2025 service plan is on addressing current operational concerns within the current service area, as opposed to extending service into new areas. The recommended changes for 2025 focus on routing modifications to existing routes and addressing current schedule adherence concerns. Route 10 is recommended to be modified to operate along Wonderland Road between Sarnia and Fanshawe Park Road, and then continue on to Masonville Mall during all operating periods. Currently, the route does not travel north of Sarnia on Wonderland and instead turns onto Sarnia to then service Western University. Route 10 also currently only services Masonville during limited time periods. The recommended change will provide a single route covering the majority of the Wonderland corridor between Southdale and Fanshawe Park Road, providing another north-south spine in the west end of the network. Through public consultation, there were some concerns with regards to the loss of direct service to Western University from residents in the Westmount area. While the change will result in those passengers having to transfer to complete their trip, the new Route 127, which is recommended to be implemented in coordination with the Route 10 changes, will not only replace the capacity lost along Sarnia Road with Route 10 modification, it will improve frequency along the corridor. The new Route 127 is recommended to be introduced, providing service between Western University and the Capulet Lane area via Wonderland Road, Sarnia, Wonderland, Beaverbrook, and Capulet Lane. The route will operate during all service periods throughout the university school year, with frequencies of between 11 and 30 minutes, depending on the service level. This is an increase in the current frequency provided by Route 10 along the corridor. It will also provide additional capacity for the Route 127 along the same corridor with the high student population living in the Wonderland, Beaverbrook, and Capulet area. In addition to the routing modifications, the plan also recommends improvements to Route 28 and 90 to improve reliability of the service. Route 28 is currently experiencing significant schedule adherence concerns in the weekday PM peak period, oftentimes losing an entire trip due to schedule delays. The recommended changes would not only improve the schedule adherence and reliability on the route by increasing the round trip time, but also allows for the frequency to increase from 40 minutes to 25 minutes during this time period. Route 90 is also experiencing significant schedule adherence delays on Sunday, as many travel patterns for both transit passengers and other motorists have changed post-COVID. The recommended changes for the route will see increased round trip times, as well as minor frequency increases for the majority of the day in order to improve reliability of the route. In addition to the recommended changes as part of the 2025 service plan, London Transit has received a request for modifications for the community bus route to service the Giant Tiger at Huron and Highbury. Planning staff gathered feedback from the community at an in-person public engagement session held at Cherry Hill Public Library. As this type of service is developed to meet the specific needs of this community, any proposed routing changes requires the consensus before changes are implemented. In this case, there was a lot of concerns with regards to the loss of another retail location in order to be able to serve the proposed new location at Highbury and Huron. Further assessment was completed after reviewing all of the public input, and it is now recommended to extend the current Friday service that serves Masonville Mall to also serve the Giant Tiger Plaza on Fanshawe Park Road. This modification can be accommodated with the existing Friday schedule and as such is cost neutral in nature. The next steps are to obtain permission from the property owners at the Giant Tiger Plaza to have the service operate on the property. Following approval of the recommended 2025 service changes, work will begin on the preparation of the service for the August 31st, 2025 implementation date, including preparation of the ADLC schedules and operator work assignments. We'll also be preparing new ride guides and updating public information for Google Maps, as well as a significant marketing campaign for passengers regarding the new service changes. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So just somebody, mover and a seconder, on the recommendation. By Commissioner Collier, second by Commissioner Riddle. Okay. Before I call the question, any discussion with respect to the communication we received or to this first presentation? Comments, questions? Cheryl, let's hear it.
I am one to say, but
I do too.
in regards to the communication number 4 from Councilor Pelosa, I completely understand what this store owner is asking for. I don't think it's unreasonable. What I think is unreasonable is the city councilor who voted against increasing funding for our hours for new service improvements. So it's a frustrating piece of correspondence to receive when we know there's absolutely nothing that we can really do to make this happen for this person. So that's my comment. My question to the chair. The services that we're looking at deferrals. I'm just curious how you weigh out schedule adherence to overcrowding. When we know both of these things are deterrents to passengers, right? If my bus is never on time, why am I taking it? If I'm crushed in here like a sardine, why am I taking it? Or being left at the curb, it's even worse. Why am I taking it? So could you just kind of explain for myself and the rest of the commission how you balance making these decisions and yeah, that's.
But before you do that, I do want to say I support your comment 100%, and that was my initial response to this as well. I found the letter to be a little self-serving, all things considered. So over to Ms. Burns with her.
So through the chair, yes, as you are very correct. Schedule adherence and overcrowding are both very important issues and are definitely a deterrent to taking transit. We do a number of things when we're evaluating the priorities for implementation in a service plan. One of which is looking at how long these issues have been ongoing for, as well as looking at all of the feedback we're receiving from the public and prioritizing based on where we're seeing the greatest concerns raised by the public when we do our public engagement sessions, as well as the online surveys. And then we kind of rank where everything is falling. And then the ultimate factor is which ones can be accommodated in with the other things that have been prioritized, right? So it is a kind of a balancing act as to where we can make the changes, and we try to balance all of those different competing interests to make the best decisions that we can to improve the service.
Okay, just a follow-up question in terms of this request as well, Councilor Pelosa. When looking at the mobility master plan, I think this is a really good case for that. You know, you've got this very large retail establishment that hires a lot of people, and they're walking over a bridge, essentially on the highway to get to White Oaks Mall, to get a bus or you know, maybe their ride or a taxi, whatever that is. Are these things taken into consideration when we're looking at finding opportunities or even development opportunities? Like if, you know, that Costco moved from one spot to a farther spot, right? And, you know, that doesn't get you any closer to White Oaks Mall. So how would something like this, do you think, fit into that master mobility plan?
Through the chair, actually, as part of the 5-year service plan, there is a review scheduled for 2026 for the Route 30 that would look at that area. So that would be where we're looking at it through that process as opposed to through the mobility master plan. The mobility master plan more focuses on the infrastructure. So things like adding sidewalks and those types of things would be considered through that, but not necessarily the routing of the.
Right, I just meant the infrastructure itself,
Yes.
not the actual.
Yes, so those things were all considered as part of the mobility master plan. We do provide our ridership data so that they can use that as an assessment as where they're seeing more people walking, those types of things, so that they can then prioritize pedestrian infrastructure to improve the ability to access transit.
Okay, I'll let other people have questions.
Other comments or questions?
Through the chair. I'm just sort of thinking about BRT right now as we know it today, and has sort of its ideation going back to 2015, 2016. We're now 2025. We still have 3 more years to go before we get to substantial completion. And now I'm sort of thinking about the route improvements that we're talking about, 10, right? And the Wonderland axis of 10. And I mean, my driving in the city, leaving at 4:45 in the morning if I'm going to go train, I don't get to see that traffic, but I certainly do get to see that traffic when I'm in town on the weekends. And like Wonderland is never not full. And then, I'm looking at construction schedule should be the will of council through the building master plan of, having something by 2035 with respect to Wonderland, which really means that we need to be planning that today, which we're not. So I guess my question is, in terms of investments that we're doing in the 10 today, like, I mean, this is just really kind of a Band-Aid until we actually come up with a better solution, right? Because, and I'm just wondering what, and sort of a theoretical conversation, but what is the better solution? Because just putting more buses on a route to have them stuck in traffic that isn't moving on a Sunday morning doesn't serve us well, doesn't serve our customer well. Reputationally, it hurts us. I reread it and then I haven't put my phone down. So I'm just wondering, do we have what is our plan for that, or do we just have to kind of eat it?
So through the chair, one of the reasons that we are proposing the change to the Route 10 is right now we don't have, like I mentioned, that straight route along Wonderland. And it is something that we've long heard from customers that there is that gap. We have very limited service right now between Sarnia and Fanshawe Park Road on Wonderland. We are looking at ways to improve the schedule adherence on that Route 10. We do hear a lot about that route. Through the analysis that we've done, it's actually believed, although there is a lot of congestion currently on Wonderland, that by not operating along Sarnia and through the university, it's actually going to be faster than what our current Route 10 is today.
Right.
So it's anticipated that will have a positive impact on the current schedule adherence that we are seeing. And then as Ms. Grady mentioned, we will be starting the process of looking at the environmental assessment, TPAP, all of that stuff relatively soon after the facility master plan has been approved by council, which is anticipated in the summer of this year.
I think this is sort of building on what Commissioner Roof said, with respect to the routes didn't actually make the list. I mean, for a lot of them, you do see the substitutes, right? The 2, I mean, there are substitutes before, but the 10 is like one of these routes that, I know just from my own sort of jetting around town is, if you miss it, you're screwed, right? So I guess I'm just sort of echoing what Councilor or Commissioner Roof said with respect to just, how we actually go about chunking these out and determining what the priorities are. So anyway, thank you very much for those. Appreciate it.
Any further questions? Commissioner Martin?
I just have a question as far as the communication goes. So I know that she's asking for us to look into it for 2025, and I understand that that's not possible. But is the route she's asking for in our plans anywhere in the future?
Yeah, through the chair, not exactly planned out to go out to the Costco area, but as I mentioned, the Route 30 is being reviewed as part of the 2026 service plan review, which is in that area. So we can include her communication for the extension as part of that overall review of the overall route.
Any comments or questions? If seeing none, I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor of the recommendation? Okay, any opposed? Seeing none. So carried. On to staff report number 3, over to Ms. Gillespie for the commission work program 2024, status report and on the 2025.
Thanks. This report provides a summary of the status of all initiatives on the 2024 work program, noting any projects that were not completed and or scheduled to carry over multiple years have been included in the draft 2025 work program. With respect specifically to the 2025 draft work program, all new initiatives for 2025 are described in detail in the report, including reference to the strategic outcome which they support, the LTC resource requirements relating to the initiative, and the priority for the project. It should be noted that a number of the projects were considered mandatory in nature when we undertook our review, and as such, they have been given a high priority. I will caution the commission that the 2025 work program as drafted is very optimistic, noting a number of the initiatives are very resource intensive, and depending on the nature and extent of the LTC staff involvement in the review being undertaken by the city, some project timelines may be bumped and or deferred to 2026. The report is presented in draft to provide the commission with the opportunity to add, change, or remove initiatives or modify the associated priority with any initiative that we've included. Once the commission has approved the work plan, it will be finalized and updates will be provided as major projects progress or on a quarterly basis as applicable. With that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Okay, so first I need a mover and a seconder for the recommendation, which is to approve in principle the direction of the draft 2025 work plan. Moved by Commissioner Little, seconded by Commissioner Collier. Thank you. Okay, I'm sure there will be some questions and comments. Commissioner Collier.
Hi, through the chair. The smart card onboard validator updates, is that just a tap pedestal that we're changing out?
Essentially, they're end of life and they need to be replaced.
And the back office stuff, is that covered off under 3.3 under other service related initiatives for additional third-party vendors?
Yeah.
And that will mean, does that mean like Presto, or does that mean like Visa, MasterCard, debit, or?
So 3.3 is actually talking about adding third parties that could revalue our smart cards.
So that's top up.
However, the replacement of the onboard validators, part of that is ensuring that the options for debit, credit, tap, those kind of things are incorporated in that new hardware. Doesn't include the costs associated with the software changes that will be required, but we're ensuring that the hardware that will be installed will have.
So we're future proofing ourselves.
Exactly.
What you're saying. Okay.
Exactly, yes.
Do we have, sorry if I missed this, do we have a plan to accept other fare media other than an LTC tap card or student card?
We don't have a plan that's come to the commission.
Okay. Those are my thoughts.
Comments or questions? Ready, Commissioner Little?
Just quickly, 4.7, does that address what I was talking about at our last meeting? The timeliness of the AODA requirements?
So that's part and parcel of what will be looked at, and the report would come back to the commission regarding that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, other comments or questions, Commissioner Madden?
Last year, what I remember about our work plan is that I remember seeing a thing with a checklet, like with little boxes that said.
That's the enclosures.
Oh, that's,
Yeah.
okay, I didn't quote the
Yep.
enclosure. Okay, that's it. And the other thing, the thing I wanted to ensure somehow happens is that when something is running behind, not meeting the dates that you're thinking, that it comes to the commission. Because last year when we were doing the smart card readers for paratransit, we didn't necessarily know it was behind until it was already behind, and then we asked about it. So, as things are not gonna meet their target, can that come to the commission so that we know it's not gonna meet the target before we miss the target?
So as I said, the way that we provide reporting is if it's a major project, we would provide regular updates as the project progresses. And we also have quarterly. So once every quarter, we come to you and the various directors for anything that they're responsible for talk about every project that's on this spreadsheet that's attached and as an enclosure that was scheduled to be started and or completed within that quarter. So essentially, the answer is yes, that's the way things should be reported back. I can't comment specifically on when. I believe we were providing regular updates with respect to the smart card. So I can't recall exactly how that happened, but essentially what you've just asked is the way that we do report back on this work plan.
Other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor? Any opposition? Any opposition? Okay, seeing none, so carried. All right, on to staff report number 4. This is back to Ms. Fleshney for the AODA Customer Service Standard Review.
Thank you. This report sets out the responses that will be provided to the Customer Service Standard Review Committee with respect to the recommended changes to the customer service standards in the Integrated Accessibility Standard Regulation adopted under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. Sorry about all of that, but that's what it is. As set out in the report, given the deadline for the submission of comments being February 6th, there was not a scheduled Accessible Public Transit Service Advisory Committee meeting available for us to discuss. However, we did share this report with all committee members a couple of weeks ago and gave them the opportunity to provide us with their feedback prior to finalizing the report. The comments that were received from those committee members concurred with the suggested feedback that is set out in the report. The most problematic recommendation from the review committee relates to the requirement of a service provider to pay the wages for a support person where one is required to access the organization's goods or services. Both the administrative burden of establishing a process to enable this to take place, as well as the costs associated with the wages, would result in significant budget pressure on public transit services, noting that if that budget pressure was not relieved by an increase in municipal funding, it would require either fare increases and or service reductions to accommodate those increased costs. The feedback set out in the report is consistent with that will be provided by a number of transit systems from across the province, as well as the Ontario Public Transit Association. And with that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Okay, so first I need to move right a seconded and note and file. Moved by Commissioner Collier, seconded by Commissioner Ritz. Okay, any discussion?
Yeah, I have one question. I know that you said that you didn't have time to consult the APSAC. I looked online and the last minutes I see from APSAC were June's minutes. So they were supposed to have had a meeting in September and a meeting in November. Now am I assuming that November's meeting didn't meet quorum, so minutes weren't posted?
To the chair, I can answer that. I think we realized in December that we had been posting them, but they should have been.
They weren't there today or yesterday. I looked yesterday. So that made me wonder what has happened and
There was, again, through the chair, there was a meeting in September and there was a meeting in November as well.
okay, and there's no minutes for September and I guess there's no minutes for November because you
They
hadn't
would
had
get
a
approved
meeting.
by the next meeting.
And
Right.
One
yeah,
thing I will say that I don't mean to interrupt you is we did receive updates at the September, November meetings as well with respect to the meeting that you're referring to. So I understand that the meetings might not be posted, but the commission did receive updates.
I mean, I
They're
went
not
where I
on the
went
agenda.
and I didn't see the, and so that's my question. Did people actually respond?
Yes, 3 members of the committee responded. And like I said, in all cases, they concurred with the commentary. Again, a number of these things are things that we have discussed with that committee and they've raised concerns, previously. The service animal piece is a big one that a number of people on that committee are not happy with the whole comfort animal situation and the potentials for conflict. I think the commission has all talked about that. So a number of those things, obviously we've talked about with that committee and they were very much on side with what we're recommending.
And through the chair, it's also my understanding that the whole pet thing, that whole policy is being looked at.
Well,
But
essentially
from a
what they're,
or is it this?
yeah, it's this. So
It's
essentially what is being recommended, it's this committee that reviewed it because that policy essentially sits in the customer service section of the integrated reg. So
Okay.
this committee is recommending essentially what they're suggesting is giving organizations more ability to ask for documentation. However, that documentation is a note from your doctor saying, I need an animal. And the issue that we have is, what is that animal? Has it been trained? Is it, is it safe to be in public and all of those things? So that's essentially what we're providing back is we think that needs to be looked at much more in depth than just, hey, organizations, you can now ask, for this piece of documentation. We think they need to look at it much more closely.
Yeah, I thought that's what they were doing somewhere else. I didn't realize that's all.
Yeah, no, it was part of this review.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor to the entire? Any opposition? Okay. Back to again this question, on to staff report number 5, the secondary school transit pass pilot program.
So this report provides an update with respect to the secondary school student pass pilot program and seeks commission confirmation of participation. As the report sets out, the next step in the process is to report back to municipal council with final estimated costs for the pilot program, as well as the memorandum of understanding, setting out the responsibilities of each of the parties to the agreement, those being obviously LTC, the City of London, and the Thames Valley District School Board. As a recap, the responsibilities included in the draft memorandum of understanding for LTC require that we establish a new fare category in the smart card system, which will allow us to track the ridership specific to that group. We have received a quote from Scheichen Bachman to do that work, which came in at just around $27,000. Procuring the stickers and or cards that will be utilized by those participating in the pilot program. I did provide some cost estimates in the report. I think it was a range of $3 to $5 for the stickers, which based on discussions with the school board, I believe that's where we will end up because the students are already issued a student card with photo ID. So us being able to just adhere a sticker on the back makes it much easier than issuing a second piece of ID. So again, once this is approved, we would procure those on behalf of the board. And again, those costs as well as the software costs would be covered as part of this pilot program by the City of London. And then the other pieces are just providing regular ridership reporting to the city and the school board for participants in the pilot. And the last piece is just providing suggested topics for the training material that the school board will issue to everyone participating on the use of public transit and the expectations for behavior while utilizing public transit services. And then subsequent to final approval by municipal council, administration will initiate the contract with Scheichen Bachman for the fare category changes and will initiate the procurement of the stickers, and updates will be provided to the commission on this project as appropriate going forward. Please answer any questions.
Okay, so I need a mover and a seconded and noted file. Moved by Commissioner Little, seconded by Commissioner Ruth. Okay, any discussion? Commissioner Ruth, I'm going to start with you. I figured you would have some points on this, but I can see Commissioner Little.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm just curious, do we have any kind of estimate on how much staff time it would take for us to be a part of this? In addition to what we've already contributed going forward from the start of the pilot to the completion of the pilot?
Through the chair, really the only piece will be staff time associated with creating that report. Once we've got the group established in the positive list, the report will be very similar in nature to what we've already created for Western and Fanshawe, other than it's now dealing with a different group and there may be some minor tweaks, but we looked at it and we didn't anticipate that it would be a significant amount of work, given that we've already done it for Western and Fanshawe.
Okay, and follow-up question, what is the process going to be for overcrowding or behavioral issues on the buses?
So those will be set out as part of the memorandum of understanding as well as the expectations. One of the things Mike and I just talked about the other day. So the stickers are designed that if they're peeled off, the chip will be damaged. So that's to avoid somebody peeling it off and selling it to someone else. But expectations that will be shared with the participants is if you peel the sticker off, you're not getting another one. Like this is your chance, this is your free pass, you know, use it accordingly. Same thing, if there are behavioral issues, the school board will be expected to, you know, to participate in dealing with that. And essentially, just like the agreements that we have with Western and Fanshawe, I mean, we have the opportunity to ban people from service if you know, if behavior is a problem. So all of those expectations will be laid out as part of that training program. In terms of crowding, that will be part of what Katie and her team will measure as part of our ridership. We will be able to track ridership based on, you know, the routes that are being utilized and measure whether or not that's having impact. So that will be part of what's shared. And when I say shared with the city and school board, obviously the commission will receive updates from us as well.
And just a follow up through the chair, I saw the last estimate being $900,000 for this for the 2 years. Is that accurate or close to accurate?
So that estimate was based on assuming a monthly pass price for 12 months a year for the participants, and then twice that number of participants in year 2, because it would extend to grade 10. We have had some discussions with the city, and it's not been finalized yet as to how we will invoice the city. And one of the things they asked us is if we're tracking ridership, could they pay the ticket rate? So if someone only uses the bus 10 times in a month, could they just pay for 10 ticket rides versus the monthly pass? Again, we've had discussions about that. We can track that. So if that goes forward, I would suggest that price would probably, again, it may come down. We don't know what the usage is going to be until we get into it, but I would suggest probably in the first instances, it will be lower than anticipated, because we were assuming just a monthly pass rate for every student. And to assume that every student is going to use the pass, I think 43 rides is the break even. So to assume they're all going to use it at least 43 times in a month, that's probably a bit of a high assumption. But at the time, we wanted a number, you know, that was based on something, and that number was arrived at in agreement with civic administration as being the most appropriate at the time.
And just, sorry, you can refresh my memory for Western and Fanshawe, when we give them the data, we're not giving them the names of the students,
No.
right? It's just the ride per pass.
It's essentially, this many students wrote it from 1 to 10 times a month. This many wrote it from 11 to so it's just buckets of, but no, there's no detail. And again, here, we wouldn't even have that detail. We'll have a list of numbers that have been adhered to a card. We don't know whose card the number's on. And so there would be no way for us, which we always do that by design. We don't want to have that information because we don't need to know that information.
But has the school board asked for that information?
No.
Okay, and the city obviously wouldn't.
No.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Whittle.
So the new fare category, I like that, but is there any way to differentiate who might already be using the bus? So whether it's existing bus pass, cash fare, that sort of thing, can that be tracked?
So it can't necessarily be tracked, but one of the things that the 3 parties have agreed on is that the school board needs to do a pre-survey with all the participants to say, do you currently use the bus?
Okay.
If so, how do you pay for it? Where do you go? Those type of things. So at least we have some form of a baseline,
Okay.
because if we don't have that, we could have 200 students who are out there buying monthly passes right now that are no longer going to buy them because they're going to be getting them for free. And, you know, we would have no way of knowing that. So, I mean, again, it's not scientifically perfect, but we are requiring those surveys to be completed in advance. And so they're doing a survey in advance. They're doing one at the end of the first year, just, you know, what was your experience? And then again, second year with the new enrollment, same thing.
So that leads to my second question. So what does success look like? Like, what is the success criteria here?
I was waiting for it.
Keep asking the same question
I was
every
waiting
month.
Based
for
on
it.
all the conversations that have happened, that I'm assuming like Thames Valley would define that success, but what does success look like?
Honestly, I still struggle to understand what success looks like. I mean, I think everyone in this room would agree that when you give somebody something for free, chances are they're going to use it sometimes. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, but then sustainability, like, yeah.
and the costs
Absolutely,
associated with
that's
it,
right.
obviously. So, again, we've continued to express that, but it's,
Like, is there a definition? Like, is there success criteria that's defined at this point that you're privy to?
there's not success criteria. Essentially, what they're saying is we're going to be reporting on the ridership. And again, yes, could you say, okay, well, this was the baseline and it
Yeah.
looks like they're using the bus more than they did before. Okay,
And right, but that's one metric, like that doesn't speak to crowding and some of the other issues that we've talked about.
right, and that's all gonna have to be balanced. And I mean, some of the other things that were tossed around way back when this was first brought forward is, it'll improve attendance at school, because if they miss the yellow bus, they have another opportunity. Again, that's something that we would have to rely on the school board to.
And don't misconstrue, like, I'm all for pilots and trying things, I think we have to do that. But it does need to be measurable as well, so we can determine how successful we are.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you.
I'm all for pilots and trying things.
I am.
That's so rare.
Through you, I did want to kind of ask, kind of going off Commissioner Reed's, like the costing stuff, but I wanted to go back on Commissioner Little and the baseline. Do we have, and I know you kind of exhausted this question, but I just wanted to know, how would we actually determine the baseline so we can actually have these measurable factors on top of that? Like, how are we gonna do that?
So the baseline will only be anecdotal from surveys. So what we'll have is, 50% of the students participating had previously used the bus and they indicated that they used it 3 times a month. Okay, so that's all will happen. It will be anecdotal. Like I said, it won't be scientific because it's essentially somebody, ticking off some stuff in a survey. But other than that, there's really no way for us to gather, because when we sell youth passes, we don't know who we're selling them. Like, we don't track that type of information. So there's really no way to get that scientific information other than the anecdotal, and then just try and match it with the group as a whole.
So then it goes back to what is the measurable successes, and then if we do have a number right off the bat, it's not very, not a very good number, not very good.
It's, again, it's going to be people's opinions, unfortunately. I mean, like I said, this is a concern I think we've raised here right from the start of this. There aren't really measurables, and it's never really been clear what the intent of the program is. So it's difficult for me to give you any more assurances than what I have.
Okay, going off Commissioner Root's questions, you did kind of mention that there was a staffing component, that you've already kind of done some of the work, so it won't be that much work, but there's still that component, and that's not gonna be sent to the city for reimbursement?
We hadn't thought that because again, we do have that staff person here as part of our complement, and that essentially is her role, is to data mine from our various systems. And because we've probably got 95% of that report created for Western and Fanshawe, it's going to be essentially pointing that report at a different set of data and then, parsing it accordingly. So we really don't anticipate that it's enough of an amount of work to even submit it.
Is there anything else that would be kind of cost incurred by the LTC that you might foresee?
That's, other than the requirements to update the software and the stickers, that's all we've come up with. Now, the other piece, obviously, in the memorandum is that this will be there will be opportunities to revisit. So if something turns up that it's way more work or wasn't anticipated, there are opportunities to revisit the memorandum.
So in the conversations with the city, are they gonna be reimbursing all costs? Is that a possibility? Or is there gonna be some type of cost that the LTC is gonna incur?
The intent, all the conversations that I've had, the intent is the city will be 100% funding. So essentially what they've said to me is, you tell us how much these things are going to cost, and that will all be part of the report that goes to council. They'll all be described, but the intent is that will be an all-in cost that's being funded by the city.
That's the stickers, that's the chips, and that's the actual.
Well, the stickers have the chip in, so.
Okay, but that's that component.
That's that piece, the software upgrade and the rides are all funded by the city.
Given the delays that we had getting the smart card readers working in the paratransit buses, and the delays were always coming from the vendor. Is there any reason to be concerned that the vendor is gonna be unable to meet the deadlines that are proposed here?
Through the chair, I never like to make guarantees about this particular vendor. But the delays associated with getting the smart cards on Specialized were really availability of hardware. They were selecting a new piece of hardware that had to be programmed and all of that. This is a change essentially to our fare tables, which they've done for us before. So when we make changes to our fare categories, they've had to do this work for us before. So this is work we're confident that they can do, and it's much more simple than, you know, getting a new piece of hardware and writing all the programming to have it interact. So we're confident that this will not be an issue. And we've essentially, again, as soon as the city approves this, we will be saying to Scheiden Bachman, do it now, so that we've got it done well in advance, because that also gives us the opportunity to get those stickers loaded and do some of the back end work before we've even issued them to make sure that we've got everything in place.
Any comments or questions, Mr. Claire?
Couple questions. One, do we have a service description for this in the sense of the product that we're offering? Are we offering 12 months worth of rides, 724, but during our operating services, because, you know, I've heard it positioned that it's a yellow bus replacement, which would be a trip to school and a trip home. So have we agreed what it is that we're actually offering here?
So the service description in the MOU is that it's essentially, it's the equivalent of a city pass for 12 months of the year. So
Okay.
essentially unlimited access for, you know,
And it will be a 12-month pass. It won't be sessional time
No,
in school
it
year.
will be. For the
Okay. So then sort of second question. We will be able to identify who is eligible as a yellow bus user today when they get their sticker, right? So we'll be actually able to measure that substitution or that usage of I live outside the 2 kilometers, so I'm actually taking a bus to school. I'd be eligible for a yellow bus to school. I'm now part of the pilot. I'm now using my card. We'd be able to track that and flag that usage separately.
we wouldn't be able to track it separately because we don't know who the riders are that are tapping. Remember, we're not gonna have that direct line. So we could ask the school board as part of their survey as part of their data to say, how many participants in this group qualify for yellow bus versus
Right.
don't? But we won't know from that if the people that qualify are the ones using the bus.
Yeah.
We'll have no
Like-
direct line of sight.
Because I'm a little bit confused in terms of, what is measure of success? And, you're talking about yellow bus avoidance and, let's use the city fleet instead of a yellow bus. It would, to me, make sense. You track who would be eligible to be on a yellow bus, which is gonna run in parallel anyway. They're not gonna pull those away and, are actually now stepping onto a city bus, right?
I can say from the school board's perspective, it is not their intent that this is replacing yellow bus.
Okay.
So, again, we can certainly ask for that question to be in the survey or for them to provide, again, that high level data, but we will not have any line of sight on whether kids that qualify for a yellow bus have stopped using it and are now using our bus.
So then last question with respect to cost, we talked about hard costs, staffing costs, hardware costs. What about the cost of entailment? So I'm a rider on, whatever, the 2, and I no longer get board because it's crowded with high school students. That comes at a cost to the commission where we've actually lost that rider. Are we able to measure that?
Again, through
And would
the,
we be able to submit that as a cost?
very difficult to measure somebody who didn't get on the
Well,
bus.
since we're all squinting at this anyway.
Customer conduct for the fee.
Yes, we have customer contacts. Obviously, we can measure crowding,
Yeah.
has crowding changed, those type of things. So, again, it will be anecdotal for us to say Carolyn has stopped getting on the bus because of this, unless Carolyn calls us and tells us that it's gonna be very hard to quantify, but I would suggest, again, the idea is that kind of after year 1, there will be an update report saying, here's how things are going. And part of what feedback we should be saying is, this is having a significant negative impact on routes A, B, and C. And either we need more funding to increase frequency, which it's not that simple because that also means buses and all of those other things, which you can't make happen that quickly. But
Being a realist.
sorry. But I would suggest that those will be the types of commentary that will be provided back from the commission with respect to what the impacts are.
But I guess using, you know, your Madam Secretary example, right? But if she stops tapping on the bus, we would be able to track that in aggregate at a root level, right? Like, we could expect to see X number of boardings on the tube on a particular segment that is proximal to Clark Road, right? And we should also be able to measure over a period of time if there's melt in that, right?
Yeah, so we would, for example, if you go with that example, we would know right now that, you know, on a typical weekday, there are 50 people with a city pass that are boarding here. And once we put this in, now there's only 30.
Right.
Yes, but have they just gone to a different stop? Like that's all the pieces that, you know,
Yeah, I mean,
but yes, we
have to
will be
sort of-
able to
Sort of
look.
broad, but you know, if we've got a funder like. Sorry, I'm just looking to see us in the room. We're in a situation where, you know, I think a lot of us question the end goal of this program, right? And, you know, we have a funder who is prepared to assume costs. You know, it's kind of eating your broccoli,
For
right?
2 years.
Right, but what I'm, you know, should we make sure that we're able to capture every single one of those costs that are part of this pilot? And say, you know what, this is a full spectrum of cost, you know, what? Yeah, you thought this was a really good idea, but you know, oh, you're running a yellow bus system, which is a cost. You're running this parallel system, which is a cost. You're actually driving potentially riders off, which is a cost. And you actually have the cost of implementing it and the cost to manage it.
And the way to actually measure the success.
And kind of shaky measures of success, and now a 5% budget cut for this year. Those are my comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Through the chair, what is the source of funding? Have they determined what that is yet?
They provided a couple of potential sources in the last report. My understanding is the report that will go in March will have a specific identified source. It's a reserve fund of some sort that I think they're funding it out of.
So just as a comment to follow up, I'm not going to approve this. I'm not going in favor for it.
Well, today, all we need to do is note and file.
No,
No, it's.
no, the commission, I mean, maybe I should have explained that as part of my introduction. So prior to going to SPPC, the intent was, school board has gone to their board and said, you know, here's our roles and responsibilities. Do you still agree? The intent was, we're here tonight. Does the commission still agree? And then if there is agreement by parties, that will go to SPPC.
So then,
So that's what I'm essentially asking when I say commission confirm that we still want to participate in this, knowing that I'm not really sure it was ever presented as a choice.
okay, so all right,
Well, if you have a choice, I'm not supporting.
honestly, I think that, a lot of the comments here could not be more clear about what the fundamental problems with this are, so, we have 6 people here tonight, which means if it's a tie, it fails. If you are against this in principle, I'm going to encourage you to vote with your conscience, and the chips are gonna fall where they may. And it's simple, so I'm not going to tell anyone to consider something that they are opposed to for the plethora of reasons we've had, you know, presented to us today, so.
Okay, that's through the chair.
Mhm.
Let's say we decline to confirm our participation, which is what the ask is.
Yeah.
What would be the next reasonable step? Do the parties meet and we try to hammer out an acceptable?
I'm just, I mean, my concern is I don't believe there is acceptable conclusions to the issues that the commission's raised, because as I stated in the very initial report that I provided, this program was never well thought out. There was never a rationale for the program other than someone in Kingston said they tried this and it worked really well, let's go.
And let's send a message if that's what the commission
So-
thinks it needs to do.
I mean, so I'm not sure what could be worked out that would change the commission's mind. That's my,
So I
my
guess it's
concern.
sort of coming out of this. like, so next step is we say nay, and it goes to SBPC.
Yes, and I would suggest probably we will be directed to participate. That would be my guess.
Okay,
Again, I could be completely wrong, but.
probably, but here's the thing, so I think what I'm getting from everyone who has spoken so far is that basically there's a lot of unanswered questions here. The biggest one being the metrics of success, and then there's funding issues coming out of our eyeballs and putting pressure on already congested roads. So if we're directed to do it, we're directed to do it, but I think if those that are expressing these very legitimate concerns want to send a message that these are our concerns and they haven't been addressed and you want to vote it down, go for it. I got it. That would be my advice as chair in this situation when I call the question. I think Ms. Blush is absolutely right. We're gonna get told we have to do it anyways. But I think if you want to send the message that you do have those concerns, vote accordingly. Absolutely. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I think just,
Yeah.
you know, declining with no reason seems obstructionist. I don't think we want to assume that posture.
We want to
But
decline.
if we decline with
reasons, yeah.
reasons, I think we
Yeah.
could all sort of land on that, right?
Yeah, and we can have, okay, then maybe we wanna ask.
I can endeavor to put together a
Yeah.
communication that outlines the concerns that we heard tonight that would be shared back with,
Yeah.
with civic
Okay.
administration, and I can share it with the commission prior to
I
make
think
sure that
that's, I think
everybody's
that's
on
a good
side.
idea. Okay,
These are concerns council should have too.
what?
These are concerns council should have too.
I'm not even gonna say anything there. Okay, yes, Commissioner Ryan.
My question would be about this whole, was this talked about when you were at your meeting? So did you talk about what the measures of success are? Or was that something people refused to talk about, or did you never come to an agreement on it?
Essentially, civic administration is acting on direction from council. Those concerns were raised in a previous report that went to council. Council disregarded those concerns and said, come back to us with the program. So from a staff perspective, there's no need to continue to discuss those because they're acting on direction from council, which was to come back with a program and the costs associated with it. So no, to answer your question, there's not been discussion about those things outside of the initial discussion the commission had when we first brought the report.
Just one thing I would say as well, just to add some commentary to this, if you choose to vote this down, it might help the counselors that are seeing some concerns with this, because then there's a renewed opportunity to have the discussion. Yeah.
My other thought is, the LTC has taken a lot of flack recently about all kinds of things, and my concern would be voting down something we've been asked to do, and it really sounds like a lack of cooperation as much as, that would be my concern, is that we've been asked to do it, it's something that's been voted on by council, and then we're not agreeing to do it. That would be my concern.
Chair, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I've had my hand up and you told me that I was gonna be next on the list and I now been skipped twice.
Okay, so I didn't actually see your hand up. What I saw was you do this, which to me I read as
No, I had
exacerbation.
my hand up. You said you're next, like you lift that to me.
Okay, well, I apologize. I didn't let Commissioner Little speak.
So my point's really quick. So I was being sincere when I said I'm supportive of pilots, I'm supportive of trying things. I think you have to be, and organizing a pilot should not take years to do. So being nimble in trying stuff makes a ton of sense. My only point is you need to be able to define what success is, and there needs to be that key criteria. So what we just talked about, it going back, expressing what our concerns are and not being obstructionist, I think is what I am comfortable with.
Okay, so essentially, if it's a negative vote, you would like a letter to accompany that to explain Wow.
if it's a negative vote.
That's right there.
So I was kind of wondering, like, if we don't really have a good measurable way to see what success would be, are we going to be actually still providing what the success rate was if we know that the numbers are not good? Because I'm concerned if we don't have like the baseline, and we don't have, just kind of that baseline, just so we know if, the numbers that we get are real numbers. I'm worried on how that could be maybe construed in a way that it is success when it's not. If you know what I mean? Like, do we have the ability to say, we can't tell you if we're successful or not because we didn't have the baseline? Like, are we able to say that, or do we have to give a level of success?
I don't foresee what we're sharing is measuring success. We're basically going to say, here's how many people wrote, right? So what is done with that and how it's compared to all of those other things. And I think one of the safeguards the commission can take when they provide that information is those caveats. You know what? We don't know if these were pre-existing riders. We don't know. I mean, we know right now how many youth passes we sell. So let's say we sell 1,000 a month. And when this program comes into place, now we only sell 800. That's a pretty good indication that 200 of those people were buying a youth pass and now they're getting it for free. So we can, we can do those things anecdotally, but what I can't say is David used to buy a pass and now he doesn't because we don't have that level of data. But we can certainly put those caveats, those asterisks on the information that we are sharing that, yes, here's the ridership, but here's all the things that we don't know to say whether or not this is really having an impact.
And if we're giving kind of the bucketed information to the TVDSB on ridership, because that's what you said, right? We're just gonna give like how many rides per this time.
Right.
and this time,
Right.
But we're not giving it associated with like a student number or anything
No.
like that. So they wouldn't necessarily be able to compare that
No.
student number with the yellow bus rider. So on
No.
the TVDSB side, they're not gonna be able to give us. good
No, and that's
information.
what I said. They would only be able to say, out of the 200 participants, X have access to yellow bus and X don't. But who they are and how they're using it, no, there's no way for us to measure that. Again, you could also require another survey, but again, that's anecdotal. That's, based on what people are responding to a survey. That's not based on hard data.
But you could also refer that, sorry, to the chair, you could also refer that to importance too, right? Like if it's 2 kilometer straight line to qualify for busing to get to a school, if you've got a rider that's lighting up 2.5 kilometers away from Clark, you can assume that they were a yellow bus rider that is now transferred over to our service, right?
Yeah, I mean, again,
It's,
what you're talking about though is a very different level of analysis than
Yeah.
what we were anticipating doing for this pilot.
Right,
Right now, you're talking about digging into every
Well-
tap and where they're getting on and, drawing that on
but
the
this is
map.
actually making a silk purse of the sounds here, right? I think we all sort of agree that the premise for the pilot is pretty shaky. And if we're actually gonna get usable data out of it, let's actually figure out what we can use, right? Because, just, handing a pass to somebody saying, here you go. We'll see you in 12 months or 24 months. I'm just not sure what we're learning there. Because the other thing is, how do we apply, and this is what we need to be thinking about, is how do we apply these learnings to the future state? How many high schools do we actually have? 22 in public and Catholic high
I think
schools?
that's awesome.
That's a lot of ridership now. And, from a counselor perspective, that's a lot of funding you're gonna have to find.
I didn't think.
You're the only guy here, so I get to leave you.
You're
Just as a follow-up, what, in my head, I'm thinking the onus of determining success of this pilot project should be on people who wanted to do the pilot project and are doing the pilot project. I'm not sure onus of success is on the LTC. If you're asked to provide the data, you provide the data, you provide, and we let them know the impact that this pilot had on our service. But determining success, in my opinion, goes to the people who started the pilot project.
Yeah, sorry. And I agree, my comments around success criteria is not us defining that. That is not our job. Our job, though, is to ask the hard questions to ensure it is successful. To be clear, I'm supportive of this moving forward as long as it's measured correctly and that there are key success criteria. And that probably lies with Thames Valley. We're providing the data for that.
No, okay.
Here's an option maybe to help, I guess, on our data analysis. Is it possible to have two separate stickers with two separate chips? One for yellow bus riders, one for walkers and non-yellow bus riders? And that would be able to give us the ability to determine if the yellow bus rider actually is using the bus or if the non-yellow bus rider is using the bus.
There's the potential, but that $27,000 quote was to add one new fare category. So now I'm adding two,
I get. that
right?
there-
So
But it would help us with our data analysis or our bringing in.
I mean, yes, then we would be actually measuring.
Some more granular. Yeah.
So yes, that is an option, but again, then the cost would increase
Is it too late to do that, Tara?
to ask.
Like ask the city?
No, I mean, so again, the intent with the way that we did this was any concerns that come up, either at the school board or at the commission, would come back to that steering committee and we would have discussions before anything would be put in front of SPPC. So I mean, yes, we can certainly include that, and yes, that would help somewhat, at least measure that piece.
Yeah, it doesn't help everything, but it does kind of just distinguish between.
But- Mike, again, it goes to, is the intent of the program, which the school board has been very adamant that it is not the intent of the program to replace yellow busing, then why do we care whether you qualify for yellow bus or not in the pilot? Like I think that's a question that may come back, but again, we can certainly have those discussions.
Okay, so I think we need to call the question at this point. Really, really good discussion. So I think we'll do the recommendation, we'll vote on the recommendation as it's stipulated in the staff report. But I think the caveat that I'm hearing we need to add to that is that if the recommendation is not accepted by the commission this evening, that we will have some comments as to why. Is that fair? Is that a fair summary of where we're at right now? Okay, so
Do you just want a motion?
pardon?
Do you want a motion?
I mean, it's a recommendation, it's in the staff report, so do we need a motion?
Just to get to the recommend, like to get to the reasons that can.
Like the letter.
Yeah, okay, yeah, let's do a
Yeah,
motion, that's a good
So
idea.
then I would be glad to move that,
Okay.
we do not confirm our participation, but we supply a letter of concerns and intentions.
I'll second that motion. Okay, is there,
Sorry if I'm making more.
So
no,
If I may,
just go over
if I may,
the.
just, if I could just get some clarification, so we have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that's here. And then now we've placed a motion to not confirm participation, but to supply a letter.
Articulating,
Outlining the commission's concerns.
articulating the concerns. Okay,
That's been seconded.
yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we're gonna need to have two votes then, basically, I think, right, or? Yeah, huh? Okay, single vote, okay.
Well, go there.
Yep.
I know we articulated the concerns, but I just wanted to know what are the concerns that we're gonna put in there? It's just a little general, so we have a specific list that we can list off to know what these concerns are. Like the ability not to be able to measure the success. We don't have a baseline.
I would phrase the concerns as, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, our concerns are the lack of a clearly defined metric of success. The concerns about the pressure on already congested routes. The lack of a baseline data point for data collection. And the potential cost ramifications That's what I understand our concerns are. Is that accurate? Does anybody want to add to that list?
That is accurate.
Okay.
The question I have is why can't we take the opposite stance where we are confirming our participation subject to these caveats?
Comments on that one?
And my point on that is to be very transparent. I don't think we have the ability not to participate. So if we are going to participate, then these caveats need to be met. Sorry, we know we need to participate, but we will participate based on the caveats being met.
The problem with that though is that's a little bit of an oxymoron, right? Because if you think about it that way, then they can't. If we have to participate, we can't give caveats. So I think that's kind of where we get a little bit stuck, right? Because we
Yeah.
can't say, if we can't decline to participate, then we can't say we'll participate subject to X, Y, and Z. So, yeah.
Can I just have one thing
Of
to point
course,
out?
of course.
The plan for this to go to SPPC is not until the end of March. So if the commission goes down the not participate at this time, given these concerns, that gives administration time to go back, meet with the steering committee. I can
Okay.
come back to the commission in February with an update. That would still probably be in enough advance for the report to go to SPPC.
Okay.
Does that, I just think that might help.
So does that mean we can defer making a decision on this tonight, but still get answers to some of the concerns that we have?
We could, or the alternative would be to say that we're not prepared to accept it right now because we want an updated report with these issues addressed to come back to us in February and then we'll vote. We could do that too.
So that just goes between staff to staff, not the council. But
Right.
Probably is in a.
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable with that.
Well, we don't want to be too standoffish.
No, but I think that every person in this room, on this side of the table at least, has made some very good arguments about what the concerns are. And I think that those need to be expressed in support of our SLT before we wade into this thing. So I think there needs to be some articulation of those concerns, but also acknowledging that this thing's moving forward for like what. Okay, so we've got a motion on the floor. Alternative proposal to that motion would be to again articulate the concerns and say we'll come back and vote next month with those concerns answered. Scott, yeah.
I'm happy to take this from
As a friendly member?
Yeah.
Okay,
you. So just.
okay.
It's not gonna be.
Sorry, Carolyn.
Why are you letting a lawyer explain the motion? I'm gonna be here writing for like paragraphs.
We have two motions on the floor.
Yeah.
Now we're adding,
No,
It's a
that's an
friendly
amendment.
amendment. It's
This
an
is an
amendment.
friendly
amendment to the
amendment
second
to
one.
the second one, okay.
It's a friendly
understood,
amendment to the
understood.
second one.
Yeah.
Okay, that, if I may.
Yep.
That we do not confirm participation.
That we defer voting on participation until February, subject to receiving,
Subject to a report back
on
addressing the concerns that.
those
Yeah.
concerns.
Yeah.
And the concerns remain the same, the four heads of
And I
consent.
got those, okay.
Okay. Any other procedural things we want to deal with here before I call the question on that one with the friendly amendment? Hang on, okay. All those in favor of the motion with the friendly amendment to defer this vote until next month with a report coming back to the commission addressing the four heads of concern that we've articulated. Those in favor?
No confirmation that we're gonna accept. We're just voting.
We're not, we're
Yeah.
just, we're gonna vote on whether or not we're participating next month once we receive information about those things. Yeah, good?
Yeah.
All those in favor? Awesome, good discussion, good job, everybody. Okay, okay. No, because it's deferred, so we're. Yeah, we're okay. It's different. Um. You want? Does anybody need a break or do you want to power through the remaining? Break. Break, okay, let's take a 5 minute break and then we'll come back at like 6:55. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to move this over to Ms. Galloway for our occupational health and safety work programs 2024 status and 2025.
It's gonna be a change of topic. Staff report 6, and through the chair, as we've discussed before, in the prior years, each year London Transit's Joint Health and Safety Committees develop an annual work plan for the upcoming year. The committee members review injuries, hazard reports, legislative changes, et cetera, and then develop strategies and programs to improve the overall health and safety of the workplace for everyone that works here. The Joint Health and Safety Committee worked very hard in 2024, and I'm happy to report that all of the initiatives outlined in the work plan, except one was completed. Sorry, all of them were completed except one. Said that backwards, I apologize. The committee worked very hard to ensure that the work was completed. A key initiative in 2025, and as outlined in the report, is that the committee brought forward a request to review LTC's defensive driving program. Because over the past several years, and I think you've seen this in other reports, LTC has experienced an increase in motor vehicle accidents deemed preventable, where the operator was found to have some type of culpability in the accident. These accidents can affect the health and safety of our operators. Some of them have experienced workplace injuries related to these incidents. So the committee is looking at the defensive driving training program, and we're going to be reviewing it to ensure it adequately addresses issues faced by operators, recognizing varying levels of experience in operating large vehicles and ensuring operators have the appropriate skill level to drive effectively in all weather conditions encountered in Southwestern Ontario. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so before we get started, we just need a mover and a seconder to note and file. Moved by Commissioner, seconded by Commissioner Carter. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor to notify? Great. Any opposition? Okay. So carried. Okay, on to the staff report that I thought was going to be the one that took the most time.
There's still time for that.
I think so. Okay, so over to Ms. Plushy. This is staff report number 7, and this is a report on the LTC's advertising policy.
The report sets out the commission's current advertising policy and the basis for same, which was approved by the commission in 2020. The creation of this policy was recommended by commission's legal counsel subsequent to a legal challenge relating to the decision in 2018 to remove pro-life advertising from buses. The report also provides a summary overview of the responses that are provided to stakeholders that call in to complain about any advertising on LTC buses or any other LTC facilities. I believe the remainder of the report speaks for itself, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Okay, no doubt there will be questions and comments. Let's start with noting and filing. So I need a mover and a seconder. Commissioner Collier, thank you. Commissioner Little. Okay. Would anyone like to make any comments on the advertising policy? Questions? Commissioner Little. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I already made my views known on the ad, and I'm not going to reiterate that. So getting a copy of the advertising policy was absolutely beneficial for me, and I have a greater understanding of the charter implications. So that was super helpful to understand. I guess the questions I have is more around processing protocol, firstly, and then the levels of approval that these types of ads go through. So this one was intentionally controversial. So it's very different than a Katy Perry bus wrap or a lingerie ad or a Stack Shop and that sort of thing. So I do see it as being in a different category of advertising. And I understand, I think the previous advertising policy was improved by the previous commission, so wasn't involved in that at all. I first heard about it through social media and then conventional media and then LTC leadership. So for advertising that is intentionally controversial, as it goes through the approval process that was outlined in that advertising policy, should, as a commissioner, I would expect to be involved in that review process, whether it's a discussion, whether it's a heads up, just to understand for intentionally controversial ads, what is potentially coming. So I guess is that a possibility? And then the second part to that is there a legal review as part of that policy? That wasn't clear to me in what I read through.
So let me start with the second question first. No, right now there is no legal review built in.
Okay.
That certainly doesn't preclude us from reaching out to legal. But there's no automatic legal review built in. Essentially what happens with any of the advertisers, be it Lamar in this case, or the other two, if it's on shelters or benches, is if there is something that they flag as, you know, potentially controversial, they share it with administration and we review it and give it a yay or nay, essentially. That's the process.
And this one was flagged, correct?
This one was
Okay.
brought to our attention, and again, based on our review, again, and the fact that, you know, there's nothing obscene in the ad, it's words, it's, you know, unless you click on or visit that website, that's when that's, again, I'm just sharing what our
Agreed, and I
assessment
think we
was.
just can't look at the ad in isolation, like.
So that was the basis. We approved it.
Okay.
In terms of involving the commission, certainly that could be part of a policy. I would caution that I think you'd want to report back because that may have implications on the contract in terms of the length of time it may take to give approval to an advertiser. Like, you know, they'll reach out to us and say, can we have approval for this? If we don't have a commission meeting scheduled, then that would have to wait. So I would just want to confirm that there wouldn't be contractual issues, or if there were, what those implications would be before we would go down that road.
Understood, and I think that piece can be managed. It doesn't need to be a formal meeting, like there can certainly be one-offs, or email communication that comes out on something like that. So I think that could be managed. But I do think for things that are intentionally controversial, that a commission review is appropriate.
Okay. Commissioner Madden?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this and I know when our initial conversations were going back and forth on email, I know that the chair's answer was that the LTC did procure a legal opinion on this issue, and I'm sure the case was considered prior to rendering same. And that was when I asked about the Hamilton case. So I had assumed that a legal opinion was rendered. And so I was gonna ask to actually see the legal opinion. So now it sounds like there was not a legal opinion.
I'm gonna just put a pause on that for a minute. Okay, so quick primer. Anytime lawyers are involved, when advice is being given or an opinion is being given, it's solicitor-client privilege. So we cannot talk about a legal opinion in an open meeting like this.
Okay.
I'm gonna let Ms. Blushny, she can confirm that one was obtained. But aside from what we've already put out in the public, anything else is gonna constitute a breach of solicitor-client privilege, and that's why the opinion's not been made available. Okay.
Is that something that we can look at in camera?
Yes, but I would suggest you want legal here to provide that, not me reiterating their opinion. We could certainly arrange that at a future meeting.
So that's number one. Number two, I from what I understand of what happened with our case and what I understand happened with the Hamilton case, that the Hamilton case, they were able to deny the ad based on pretty the same reasons that we're using to accept the ad. What I see different that happened with Hamilton is they spent 3 months trying to getting opinions from their stakeholders, from the ad company and from whatever, to come up with, to weigh the balancing that they're supposed to balance before they made their decision. So my question here is, what metrics were used here so that you could assess harm and that you could weigh the balancing act that you're supposed to weigh according to that's exactly what our policy says, is that we're gonna balance between the rights of opposing, I forget what the words are, but opposing rights, we're gonna balance opposing rights. So I don't know what level of administration that this goes to and who makes the decision, but what metrics are used to do that?
So again, as I indicated earlier, what we looked at was there offensive language? Was there, so it was more about the actual words in the ad, not what it was talking about. In terms of what was discussed with legal, again, I'm not at liberty to share that here in the open session, so I'm treading a fine line as to what was assessed and what was discussed with legal.
And a follow-up? So the website that it gives, it's the website that you click on, that you go to, that has the controversial stuff on. It has the stuff that is discriminatory, that is misleading, that is harmful, right, to the population. I guess I'm not understanding why that wouldn't be taken into account when you're assessing the ad. And I suppose if you can't answer those questions, then I would personally benefit to see what the legal opinion is. And I guess I would be asking if we can go in camera at the next session and see that legal opinion.
But, if we are going to go down that road, we are going to need a motion in order to direct a staff report to come back during an in-camera section with additional information. I think that would be the most appropriate avenue to deal with it. Now, that being said, I think it's really important also to make it clear that if we do have lawyers come and talk to us about this issue in an in-camera session, whatever is said in that session cannot make it to anyone else's ears because it's solicitor-client protected. So that means not your spouse, not your granddaughter, not your dog, not any community member. And I think we need to understand that before we make that motion, okay? Because there are significant consequences for disclosing something protected by solicitor-client privilege. So as long as that's clear, I think that the motion would be probably the way you'd want to go, but it's ultimately up to you if you want to make that motion. Yes.
So I just want to drill into that a little bit.
Absolutely.
To make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, so this ad kind of sets a bit of a precedent moving forward, and I'm not using that term as a legal term. Just to be clear. And I think if we run the risk of seeing other organizations try to push the envelope with this type of advertising. And I think we need to be prepared for that. So I guess if we are talking about getting sort of legal involved in that sort of thing, is there any way that we can get like a comment on if this is actually, I'm not going to say disinformation, but misleading information, if it is crossing boundaries with human rights, and where it's like, I don't want to play armchair lawyer, that's not my intent at all, but how do you cross that line? Like I do believe we as a commission need to know about these things, and we need to be the decision makers on these, but how can I make informed decisions, which is taking my personal preference out of it and really looking at it from a very black and white perspective? How can they help us with that, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I think that that's a really good point. My childhood best friend is transgender, so I'm sure you can appreciate how I feel about these ads. And again, the lawyer in me understands why we can't necessarily get rid of them, but the human in me doesn't like them, that I can say with complete certainty. I think that that's a good a good question to ask. I think we want to be careful to Ms. Poleshny's point. We don't want to have a lawyer giving an opinion on every single ad
Right.
that comes in, because
Right.
that would be
Yeah.
extraordinarily costly.
Yeah.
And be very prohibitive to allowing advertising. So I think if there's a kind of a way to sort of make that pragmatic in what you're requesting,
That's
I
the
think
word,
that that's,
Yeah, absolutely.
okay,
That's exactly what I'm asking.
okay. Any other comments, questions? I'm sorry, I did see you, or Councilor Burr.
I'm just gonna start with after this item, I gotta go, so it's nothing to do with the item, I just have another engagement. So like, I did hear, like, the ad itself, I don't see, I don't see an issue with the ad on the bus, but it's the website where the issue is, and the website definitely does have discriminatory language in there, and disinformation, I would say disinformation. And I went through everything, and I don't know which delegate said it, but, you know, like, I thought the LTC's ad policy is actually pretty good. It's actually pretty automatic in capturing these things. And I was just kind of confused with some of the lines that I saw in the advertising policy, because one of them specifically says an ad can't contravene any existing law or regulation. And that was kind of like a blanket statement on its own in the advertising policy. And then I kind of see, you know, we do have the section 15 charter rights. So actually, you know, a little bit down the line from section 2, the 2B, freedom of expression, down the line on section 15, I do see conflict there. I do see in contravention of that. And, you know, just like a little Google search, like, I'm not a lawyer either, but kind of checking out the Ontario Human Rights Code, section 1, also, you see those issues. So I'm kind of wondering, like, I thought that just kind of reading the ad policy, just on that alone, I have another example too, but just on that alone, the ad policy, in my opinion, should have been able to not approve the ad or the link anyways to the website part, just by saying that on the ad policy. And then if you go a little bit further, I think Commissioner Madden said this, the ad has to balance competing rights, right? So, you know, I do see that we are trying to allow section 2B, the freedom of expression, but I don't see a balance there, because I do see that that's coming at the cost of section 15. And so I, like, you know, I was kind of confused on the balance that I saw. So I thought, you know, I was just a little confused why the ad was allowed on, or was to be approved. I would have thought, you know, if we were to kind of go into the charter and maybe you need like a section 1 analysis or something like that to minimally impair the ad, maybe pulling away the .ca and not having the ability for someone to log into the website while they're on the bus, because everybody's got phones on them. So really the ad is the ad on the bus, but because I have a phone and everybody has that device, they can easily go in, and then all of a sudden, you know, our LTC bus becomes, you know, a conduit to go to this website to get into this, you know, discriminatory and disinformation and misleading information that we have in there. So I was a little confused, and I just wanted to know, how is the determination made to approve that ad on the bus using the LTC advertising policy?
I thought I'd answer that a couple times, but again, we looked at the actual words on the ad. If we go back to the case that I talked about in 2018, it was a pro-life ad that essentially had what looked like a fetus that, you know, had been aborted, obviously, and that caused all kinds of issues. We said, no, that's, you know, that needs to come off. As I say in the report, that brought legal action, and we paid for the cost of reprinting that ad and putting it back on our buses. So it's based on essentially, you know, our interpretation of what that ad is. So again, we're more than happy to have legal come and provide, you know, possible tweaks to this, or, I mean, I think you've all touched on it. It's not as simple as any one of us looking at it and going, I think this is okay, or it isn't. It's going to require, in these cases, a comprehensive legal review. You talked about Hamilton. They spent 3 months paying lawyers to review whether or not they should say no. So it's not, and that's certainly, you know, we can bake that into our policy. That's certainly an option. But I would like the opportunity to bring that report back and talk about what the implications of that are. That's essentially.
One thing I also just want to piggyback on there, so I think it's also important to remember, when someone buys ad space, no one at the LTC goes in and does a marketing, finessing of the ad. So there's no ability really for them to say, well, you can run the ad, but you can't have a website on it. The other thing I think that's really important to remember is, so the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms is from Pierre Trudeau Senior, okay? There's like 40+ years of jurisprudence about Section 2B, Section 1, the Oakes test, and I think, like, I'm not gonna say I'm an expert on it because I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I think that it's really dangerous for us to sit here and start having a technical legal debate about something that is extremely complicated and has, again, like 4 decades worth of case law about. That is something that a constitutional lawyer who is a subject matter expert in that has to look at, okay? And like I say, this is someone who's pretty good knowledge of human rights law. I wouldn't go down that analysis and give my opinion on that. So I don't think that we want to say that people who are not lawyers and people who are just looking at ads kind of on a high level basis, we don't want them going down to Section 2 analysis. That's not fair. That's not a fair ask of anyone of our senior leadership team.
Section 1 analysis.
We need, pardon?
In Section 1 of the Oakes Act?
The Oakes test is 1, 2B is freedom of expression, okay, to be clear. And yes, I know that that's right. So I don't think that we want to put that on them. That's not a fair ask. I think if you want to add something to the policy that asks for legal review, I think more in line with maybe what Commissioner Little was getting at. I think as long as we keep it pragmatic, someone should definitely bring that motion to have our senior leadership team have an opportunity to study this issue and provide more information, absolutely. But I would just really caution everybody here to be careful about being armchair charter lawyers, because none of us are that. And we definitely don't want to put that level of burden on someone who's ultimately going to be accountable for that analysis if we tell them they have to do that every time we get an ad. So take that with what you want, but yes.
So, like, I see my role as someone who is to just ensure that public spaces are free, or environments that are free from discrimination. And I have seen that, time and time again, get resolved, through the courts. Like, I'm not a lawyer, but I have watched it before, so I do feel like there's a good precedent there. I don't want to get technical on the legal analysis or anything. But I do see, just with the communications that I got when the ad went up, continually lots. And then from what we saw here, there is clearly a harm going on with the discriminatory and stigmatizing language that we see on the website. Like, I get, we can't necessarily tell them what they can and can't have on the website. And I understand, any democracy has that debate. I just feel like our city asset, which, the LTC asset, which is an extension of a city asset, is not the grounds to have that type of debate. We're supposed to be providing a public service. We're supposed to be providing a public service that's safe and inclusive and accessible. And from the things that I've heard from people, like, before you saw on the delegations today and from the delegations, that space is not doing that right now. And I feel like regardless if we want to be armchair constitutional lawyers or not, we should recognize that we need to make sure that that space is inclusive and safe by just kind of recognizing that discriminatory language is there. So,
I agree. So to that point, I absolutely agree with you. Like I said, I think the ad is awful. And I've said that to every media outlet that I've spoken to. I personally do not like that that's there. But if you ask our senior leadership team to make a value assessment every time we get an ad in, then they are forced to determine whose rights are more important than someone else's, because there are people now that are asking for the responding ads to be taken down, right?
which don't have a website on.
They don't. You make a great point there. They don't, but at the same time, we're not gonna take those responding, like that's.
I'm not saying
Yeah,
take the ad down. I'm just worried about the content on the website.
So I think them, and again, I think that the reasonable thing to do here, because these are all very good concerns, and I think there's no denying that this has definitely caused some people to feel very unsafe. I don't think that we could deny that. But I think the reasonable course of action here is to give the senior leadership team some time to come back to us with a report with legal input. If it is gonna continue to be a meeting with lawyers, it's gonna be in camera, unfortunately. We can't have that debate publicly because of the solicitor client privilege piece. But I think that's the thing to do, because we need to be real careful that we're taking a pragmatic approach to this, and again, not causing someone to have to go through a charter analysis on every single ad, especially someone who's not a lawyer, or not causing a lawyer to have to be hired to do that on every single ad and make a value judgment about whose belief system is better than someone else's. I think we gotta be really careful with that.
I agree, and I don't wanna get into any of that. I was just kind of, that's why I was focusing on the LTC advertising policy alone, and that's why I saw like with the balance of competing rights, you know, I do see that we have given the rights for the freedom of expression component, and we've kind of forgotten about the section 15 component. And I do see the balance is not balanced, and then, you know, I just wanted to, like, I guess my real question I would ask, and I know I've asked this, so you don't give me an answer again, but, you know, like, using the LTC advertising policy, and just kind of how it explicitly states what would be approved and what would not be approved for an ad on the bus. I felt like that policy, just the way it looks, is good enough to say, you know, yeah, you want let kids be on your bus, that's fine, but we took a look at your website and there's a lot of discriminatory, stigmatizing information in there, so we can't put the .ca thing on it, you know what I mean? And I just thought that the advertising policy would be able to capture that.
Commissioner Nunn?
And second to that, I agree with you completely with what you're saying. When the first ad ran, we got this influx of commentary, right, all over the place about the harm that this ad was causing. And so I think that the second time, when we renewed it again without further scrutiny, like after we had all of that input, to then renew it again without further scrutiny somehow seemed worse yet. Because I too, I thought that what's in our policy was good enough to turn it down, because there, you could show the harm and by the website, the misinformation, all. I thought our policy was good enough for that. So then when it didn't work for the first time, but then we got all this feedback, I'm not sure why we didn't have more scrutiny after that before we renewed it.
Comments or questions? For sure.
I was on the commission when we came up with this policy, or we didn't come up with policy, our lawyers came up with policy. And around the Canada has no abortion laws, I believe the ad actually said there ought to be a law. And I'm a copywriter, that's my trade. It didn't violate ad standards, but it got pulled anyway. Too much media presentation, and in the end, we had to put it back on again. We've extended the message on the roads, extended the media glare, which caused more harm. And what a company has on their website, we have no control over. Absolutely none. Even if we vet it, if we get their contract today, we look at the website, yep, okay, you're good to go. We're happy with what you have on your content. They can change it the minute we sign the contracts, and we have no control over that. And please don't get me wrong, I find the messaging appalling. I find the whole situation appalling based on my own family and the way this interacts with them. But if we were to scrutinize every single ad, these incredible people at Fairy Godparents would not have had the opportunity to have a counter ad. Wouldn't have happened. They wouldn't have had the opportunity to put their message out on social media and share it and have this incredible grassroots movement to raise awareness. They wouldn't have been here today to educate us on what this means. So I would welcome having a lawyer here for an in-camera session to discuss this, but I also am very cognizant of the Charter of Rights and of ad standards. And if we start personally, because I'm sorry, we are all good people here in this room. There is very little opportunity or chance that any of you are going to be able to separate the personal and professional on certain situations, certain topics. And that bias is always going to be there, right? That's why we have the legal teams to do that kind of thing for us. So I just caution how much we want to restrict this. And, you know, I agree with you, Councillor Ferreira, that this is an extension of the city. And I think the fact that we have to pay or we have to earn the money for the advertising on these buses to keep the system running, this could all be alleviated if we had the proper funding. We wouldn't need advertising on the buses, as you know. So I just be very, very careful before we start cherry picking what's important to us and what isn't. Because it's something important to all of us, right? Especially for kids, when kids are involved, I completely understand that. But I also am very concerned that we would be eliminating the opportunity for other people to speak up for themselves.
Right, Commissioner Little, and then we'll go to Councillor Ferreira.
Okay, so, I'll be succinct. So just a couple things. So I think the legal commentary in camera is absolutely beneficial. I'd like to move forward with that.
Okay.
So I'm not talking about all ads, talking about the controversial ads. And I don't know if I need to make a motion, but I think for those that are identified as controversial ads, I do think there should be a commissioner's review for those controversial ads so that we can have dialogue around it. So that we're getting ahead of it rather than having after fact conversations like we are right now. So I think that's very important. And then lastly, I think for the controversial ads, adding the step of legal review, while costly, I do think there's value in that as well.
And then,
So, I guess like in kind of response, I wanted to know, I don't know if you can answer the question, like what would constitute, our rejection of an ad using the advertising policy with what's stated in there? Because like, if this is not an example, what would be an example?
I mean, I'm not sure I can make one up off the top of my head. Again, the one that we talked about in 2018, we thought that went against the policy and we removed it and we put it back. So I think it just goes to demonstrate that it's never a cut and dry, it's never a cut and dry decision. And I would hazard a guess that any lawyer that's going to go and do a complete assessment is going to give you their advice and they're going to say, oh, by the way, this isn't going to necessarily protect you from getting sued by either of the parties that this argument is happening. So no, I can't give you something off the top of my head that I would say goes against what our policy is. And I mean, I don't think we need a specific motion that Commissioner Little just articulated. I think it's simple enough to say, direct staff to come back with legal that covers all of the issues that we've talked about. I don't think we need to get specific. And in terms of having the commission review and all of those things, that would require a change to the ad policy. And again, as I said earlier, I think you want us to have the opportunity to research what those implications may be on our ad contracts and stuff, just so that when the commission does make that decision, they've got all the information that they need.
That's fair.
okay, for sure.
You know, as I listen to this, what I see is when the decision was made at the level of administration, that it's a judgment call. It's an objective judgment call. You look at what it is, you've weighed, does this cause harm or not, and you've made a decision. There's an other number of people out here that look at it and say, well, I look at the same policy and I would have made a different judgment call using the information I have to turn down that ad, right? So I don't know, like, is there a vote that says this number of people in the room would make a judgment call this way, you would make it that way, who's right and who's wrong? And how does that get figured into the whole thing.
Well, here's my question to you, Commissioner Martin. We have the benefit of hindsight and this thing exploding. What if it hadn't? Would we be sitting here having this conversation right now?
I don't know, but I also, to add to that, I would say it did explode. It did explode and then we
But that-
still approved an extension.
But this is my question though, right? Is do you see where that line of inquiry takes us, right? Is doing a poll as to how many people would say yes and how many people would say no. We have two people here saying, I hope we would have this conversation. Would we not? I don't know. I really don't. Maybe because we have two people who say that they would have got it forward, but the point is we're having this conversation now because of what's gone on publicly, but if there hadn't been any public blowback on this, would anybody have even brought this up at a meeting? I don't know.
But I would say the reason there was
Maybe.
blowback public was because there was harm done. And that there was a certain segment of the population that saw this and felt unsafe and said, oh my God, I cannot put my kid on a bus. That is my transgender kid that has this ad that they're already in a state of turmoil. And now there's an ad there that is telling them they're not worthwhile, right? So we did get that blowback and we didn't listen to it before renewing the ad. And that is a
What I'm
concern.
trying to say is hindsight's 20/20, right?
But
But-
the hindsight happened and we had time to do something about that before the renewal and we didn't.
Okay, so. I see, I'm gonna go with Councilor Farrett, then I'll go with Commissioner Little, and then. We're gonna try to come up with a plan here that makes sense of what we've talked about, okay, so let's go with Councilor Farrett first.
Thanks. So like, I know like that Supreme Court Canada ruling has really kind of messed things up and made it really complicated. Because like I was looking at the city's corporate advertising and sponsorship policy, and they have pretty broad discretion to be able to refuse an ad if it kind of goes against community values or our strategic initiatives. And then, you know, when I was reading, kind of trying to get my information, I do see that it seems like it's that Supreme Court of Canada ruling that kind of sets this and kind of really puts a roadblock. So, but then there's nothing we can really do to get around that, obviously, because it is Supreme Court of Canada. But just, you know, I do see just kind of from that ruling, and even in the report too, the report did say, if you do have like discrimination or discriminatory language, that would count as a reason to reject. And kind of to Councilor or Commissioner Madden's points, you know, like we're talking about a vulnerable population, like the delegations did bring up the fact that the suicide rates are quite high. So that threshold, that temperature is already really high. People are kind of on the edge, and I'm just really worried. Like I personally do have friends who have committed suicide for exactly this situation. So when I see people telling me when they go on the bus and they're feeling that like stigmatization, they're feeling that uneasiness, I already know the temperature is already up just by the structure of society as it is. And I just worry that, you know, it doesn't take much to tip someone over the edge. And if I want to do what Commissioner Little is saying, getting the legal argument, but I'm worried that that's going to take a time. And that means the ads are going to be up right now. And that means there's going to be a full month of that environment that really kind of raises concerns for me. So is there anything we can do in the meantime? Like I want to be as reasonable, as practical as possible, which is why I thought maybe the best idea would just be cut out a blue square of a sticker and just stick it on dossier. But
Commissioner Little?
I have nothing to.
Okay, so. What I think we should go, my humble suggestion here is that we go with, let's direct staff to come back with some additional information. We can do it in camera with some lawyers on the understanding that nothing is leaving that room because it is solicitor client privilege, and I cannot emphasize that enough. If there is a desire to explore this further, I would like to give staff an opportunity to study this issue and bring back the report. So are we comfortable with giving that direction?
Provided we time box that.
Okay. What would feel comfortable for you? Commissioner Clark.
I think that's good. I mean, I'm hearing lots of interesting arguments, right? Having been in the advertising business, you can only evaluate a message based on what the creative is, right?
So I'm specifically letting you for your 2 cents here.
So I'll just put that out there. In terms of the action I'd like to see us take tonight is, let's put this over to our next meeting, have staff actually come back. We can have common, non-jurist language with respect to Supreme Court decision that actually allowed us to land on the policy that we've got. And then I would also say, just because I've heard the Hamilton reference actually brought up a couple of times, that we, have that conversation in light of that Hamilton reference and have that update. Also realizing that that also is probably going to get appealed, because, the ink is fairly dry on that. And that, we may still not, with respect to Hamilton, actually have a final answer yet. So I think I'd be comfortable in doing that. And I guess my question to staff would be, through you, Madam Chair, is do we think that 4 weeks, realizing that February is a short month, and we're going to be here 4 weeks, is that enough time?
Through the chair, I've already given legal counsel a heads up that they may be requested to come back at the February meeting. So, we can certainly endeavor to do our best. We may not have every answer that we need, but we can commit to bringing back something and having legally here in February.
And then I guess just sort of second to that is, like, there's a commercial law opinion here, in terms of advertising, but there also is a constitutional law opinion. Is our council capable, able to do that, or they would actually have to see outside counsel?
No, they're able to do
They're doing that in-house, okay.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, they're paying,
Yeah,
like, several hundred lawyers.
How long does it extend before through the chair? Till February 19th.
Commissioner Rowe, is that satisfactory?
That is satisfactory. Thank you.
Is everyone comfortable with that plan? Sure, go ahead.
I like the direction to get that in camera, with the questions answered that we had with that discussion. I'm just not comfortable with the time, I know you guys need the time to do all that. But that means the ads on the bus until February 19th, and then it could potentially get continued if they decide to renew the ad, right? So I'm worried about, I'm just worried about that, okay? I do have, concerns about that.
Just a question, is there, I guess, I don't understand how these are all done, but there's a contract with that, so there's no way to suspend the contract while the discussion takes place.
Not without being sued. Right.
What's the, if he gets sued? No, I mean, no, he gets sued. There's, I've gotta believe that there's law firms out there that would be willing to take on the case, right?
Okay, so as someone who came from a Bay Street law firm, if you get sued and you carry it all the way to a trial, you're looking at $500,000. Our ad revenue is somewhere around the 800 to 900,000. So more than half of our ad revenue dedicated to if we get sued.
Unless you can find a law firm who would take it.
No, I'm sorry, as a lawyer, no, nobody, I'm not doing anything for not my hourly rate. Like, there's very few lawyers out there who are willing to do that. And they're probably not the kind you want to hire. Okay.
Through the chair, what if we don't renew the ad on the map? What happens then?
I would have to confirm with legal. My understanding is we had no basis to deny the extension because we approved the original ad. So once it's approved, but there was no basis to say, okay, well, you've had long enough, we need you to take it off. But again, I'd want legal's opinion on that.
we have the ability to not renew an ad when the renewal date comes? Like, is that something that we have discretion to do,
Yes, but we could get sued
just by saying?
because it's already been.
We were-
And one
It's already been
caveat,
placed.
one caveat to this, even if we found some magical, amazing, competent pro bono lawyer to take up our cause, if you lose, which we probably would on this particular ad, you pay the other side's costs. So even if we don't spend $500,000 doing this, we are still gonna pay somebody else's $500,000 legal bill.
I would also add, and I think I did put it in the report, our understanding is this is a national campaign. So this ad isn't just running on London Transit buses, it's a national campaign. So it has been approved in various locations across the country.
Which would be used as precedence.
Practical question to the chair. In terms of our inventory that like 250 some odd chassis that have bus boards on the side of them, is there any capacity constraint that you could squeeze them out on the basis of capacity? Oh, sorry, we have no room.
Again, that would be Lamar. But again, there would be no basis for them to say, okay, well, call us when there is room and extend it.
Yeah.
So
But just in terms of turning the heat
It's
down,
actually not a bad idea.
I would suggest that we are nowhere near capacity.
I wouldn't think so, just being a writer, but I
There's
just
lots of us.
I watched that.
Nothing on-
It's not a bad idea. you know.
Hail Mary.
It's not a bad idea. We need someone to come in and buy like all of the bus boards and just like,
But I just would want to caution. We are a public meeting, we are a public session, we are now getting into potential paths that we should take that, you know, should we get any further down that path, we should be moving the camera.
I think that right now I think everyone has expressed some very good arguments. I think what we need to do is we need to give our senior leadership team a chance to come back with this information. And I think that we need to potentially have council come in, and I think during the camera meeting. That would be my suggestion as to how we proceed. And I agree with Commissioner Collier, it's funny to joke about pushing things out due to capacity and things like that, but at the end of the day, contract right now. And we are bound to honor it unless we want to be sued for breach of contract, among other things, which this organization will do because it is the same one that had the ads on the buses for anti-abortion stuff last time. So we know they will do it. Yes.
I have one more question, and this is about procedure. So this originally all came down, I know I was at my cottage, so it was sometime over Christmas, right? When all of this original stuff happened. And then at that time, the correspondence that came back was that it said basically, this is the commission's position and that you were the only one who was supposed to talk on it in its position. And I really wondered at that time, is it the commission's position? Because we haven't had the opportunity to talk about it. And I felt like I would have been more comfortable with this is the commission's decision. Now, after we've had the discussion, that we can put it out and say, this is the commission's position, but it wasn't at that time. And looking back, I'm wondering if the proper thing to do then would have been to call an emergency meeting like this to talk about this, so the commission would then have a position.
Commissioner Flynn.
I would say the commission's position is its express policy. And the policy prevails until we
But
as a
there was an
commission.
interpretation of a policy, right? This policy is open to interpretation.
Any policy is open to interpretation.
Well, and
Right.
that's what I mean. That's why I would have felt more comfortable had this discussion happened first before we were told this is the commission.
But then I'd also just remember our posture as a board, we're a governance board, we're not an operations board. So, you know, we have to be very careful about our colleagues here that are, you know, working hard in terms of, you know, directing their work. That's why we actually have policies. So us as a commission, you know, we'll receive counsel, we'll get our advice updated with respect to the Hamilton decision. We'll have a reassertion of the Vancouver decision that, you know, was the Supreme Court reference case. And if need be, we'll amend our policy then. I don't think we want to be doing stuff on the fly and calling meetings at the request of the chair, just because we've got a couple of emails. And again, I don't mean to sound very dispassionate about it, because I find, you know, this just beyond the pale in terms of how very smart people can use public vehicles and media, pardon me, to communicate their positions that I don't agree with. But that's free speech, right? And, you know, we need to receive that counsel, right? And, you know, had we had a meeting and a call the chair over Christmas, would we have been able to assemble an opinion that would have actually been able to take into account all the moving piece parts and give us a decision within the window of the contract? No.
The fact of the matter remains too is we can't not speak on an issue that has hit the news, especially when it's something like this. So there's no option to just decline to comment and have these ads and have there's no option not to explain the policy and to further communicate that it doesn't express the values of the organization. So I appreciate that you perhaps feel slighted that maybe your opinion wasn't solicited prior to me speaking on this issue, but we had about 24 hours notice between when we were aware of the concerns about these ads and CBC calling. Okay, so there's no option to simply not comment, okay? Occasionally things do happen quickly.
I think, you know, one of the difficulties is that, you know, this potentially can attract litigation, right? So making sure that, you know, we've got focused comments either from the general manager or the chair of the commission is, you know, trying to minimize, you know, us madly going off in our own direction, you know, as well-intentioned as we may all be sitting over here, right? We need to actually keep the focus there.
On the flip side, a public statement that says this is our position and it complies with our ad policy really hinders our success at some point fighting the ad, right? Because we publicly said this is our position and we don't have a problem with the ad. So, you know, I see why I now.
There wasn't.
No, sorry.
There
Our
wasn't
ad
ever-
policies are ad
No,
policies.
there wasn't ever a comment that said we don't have a problem with the ad,
Right.
so let's not.
But what I mean is that the statement that was made, it makes it exceedingly harder to win any sort of legal case on it now that we've approved it once and approved it again after we received feedback. And that's my concern.
Sure, I guess, you know, and I agree with Commissioner Collier, like, we're a governance body, we're not operations. But as a governance body, past term governance body anyways, we approved this advertising policy that pretty explicitly lays out what we can and can't allow on the bus. So just kind of with respect to that, we do have the policy that should be able to capture these things and make its way through still. So, you know, like I would wonder how do we in the future kind of mitigate something like that happening? What kind of extra language would we have to put into this policy to make sure we don't find ourselves in this situation?
Okay, so that's something that we would need a legal opinion to come back with, right? So what we need right now is we need some direction to give to our senior leadership team, okay? So you want to go?
No, all I was gonna say is that goes to my point of having controversial ads flagged and having a commission review as soon as that happens, rather than being very reactive as we did through this entire situation.
I'm not against that.
No, I'm not suggesting.
I
you are.
think you guys are on the same page.
Yeah.
We just need to, I think the two of you are
We just need to
actually very much
document that.
aligned.
Yeah.
We need to give our senior leadership team some direction here in terms of what the commission would like in order to deal with this issue going forward. That's what we need right now, okay? Go ahead.
Yeah, no,
If you have a suggestion,
No,
let's hear it.
I was just gonna say, as the chair, do you want to try to define that and gain our agreement on it?
I'm thinking that we come back and again, we talked about timelines and you wanted something to come back on. Okay. I'm thinking that we need to to come back to an in-camera session with council, provided they're available. We can do that next meeting if they're free. And to have, you know, the things that have been raised so far be explored with a legal opinion, to come back and have that conversation more fully, and to give the senior leadership team an opportunity to get this information. Because I hear all of the concerns, but I also am very cognizant of the need to not do things on the fly. I think those are really great way to summarize the concern here. Because this is a big deal. This is a huge deal. And there's a lot of moving parts, and, you know, Commissioner Collier is absolutely right. We got corporate questions with ad standards. We have constitutional questions. We need to think this through. So my suggestion would be to bump this over to the next meeting, but with an in-camera session, so we can actually have the information that we need. And then go from there in terms of whether or not someone wants to amend the policy once we have information about what that would look like. Anything like that, I think we have to get that information so we can have a real conversation about it, to make sure that we make the right decision. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm still in agreement with that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what I'd like to do then is to wrap this up is to, again, maybe we'll defer this to next meeting to an in-camera agenda item and ask for a report to come back from ESSA. So you go ahead.
Well, this was a note file. I don't think you need to defer. I think you can, you know, file this report and direct staff to
Okay.
come back
To an
with.
in-camera
to
session
an
with
in-camera
council.
session.
Okay. I don't think, we need a motion for it?
I think.
Yeah,
I think we need-
Direction for staff. and
Yeah,
I'll
we need to-
move what I moved, right?
Okay,
So-
I'll second that. Okay. So let's do that.
So just to be clear, what I moved is that we direct staff to take a look at current policy in light of the decisions that allowed us to land on that policy. Also picking up the Hamilton decision, which is a latest decision, and incorporating that, and then setting the table with respect to this particular advertiser. Everybody cool?
The council will be able to answer questions as well on kind of the interpretation or like.
Be in camera, right?
Yeah, so
we'll
sure,
be able
sure.
to-
Sure.
I don't think we show and tell, no.
We keep it more general, I have the wording, direct staff to arrange a camera session with legal to know what was expressed. I think reviewed with legal,
Well, I think Scott's is.
And Scott's is better, yeah.
to look at current policy.
Yeah.
And land on,
In light of.
In,
In light of,
yeah,
in light of
how,
the Hamilton decision, which is gonna.
I would say, yeah, how the Hamilton, I
I
would
would say recent.
how recent case law, may impact it. I think is the way we want to go with that.
I just don't think you
So-
wanna limit it just to Hamilton.
Yeah,
Well, no,
Because
yeah,
the
okay, so,
others we
so
are
this
aware.
policy stated October 2020, so why don't we just say case law post October 2020 to
Sure.
today?
Yeah, to determine basically if the law has changed, the legal review of this policy. And
Right.
yeah, I think that that's a really good way to put it.
Sorry.
Try and read that one more time, maybe that.
He's gonna do
She's gonna
that.
let me chair- she's gonna like petition to not let me chair any more meetings because of all these motions today.
so. Got, that the commission directs staff to look at current policy. In light of the recent case law. And how it may be impacted post 2020.
Post October 2020, how the policy might be impacted.
If the law was changed or how it may be.
I think, yeah, so what we wanna do is we want to, we wanna have, we wanna have to direct, staff to return at an in-camera, session at the February meeting. And then it was, we want to, review.
Assessing the advertising.
Yeah, we want to
Review the current
assess-
advertising
review the
policy.
current advertising policy. In consideration of any post-October 2020 case law.
Right.
Mission that administration returned with an in-camera session at the February meeting to review the current advertising policy in consideration of post 2020.
Post-October 2020 case law. Yeah,
Case law.
perfect. Okay.
Okay,
It does say that.
that administration return with an in-camera session at the February meeting to review the current advertising policy in consideration to the case law of post 2020. Post October, beginning October.
So basically, it's
What we're saying is
looking at the advertising policy with updated case law. So essentially, if the law has changed, do we need to be making some amendments to this policy? What do they look like? Logistics of it, that's what we're looking at.
There's not a lot of cases like that.
Well, so that's what the lawyers are gonna,
That's what
that's what the lawyers are gonna get paid for, so don't worry about that. Okay, I am going to call the two questions, so we already noted and filed, we had a mover and a seconder, all those in favor of noting and filing. Awesome, okay. We had a mover and a seconder on the motion, all those in favor. Excellent, okay, both agreed. Good job, guys, with discussion on these topic there. Pardon?
I gotta go.
Enjoy your salmon.
It's still there.
They're just getting to it.
I don't know, it might be congealed.
Yeah.
That sounds really gross. On the staff report, on to staff report number 8, over to Mr. Gregor for our zero emission bus procurement update.
Through the chair, staff report number 8 is a note file report, providing an update on the progress of the zero emission bus project. Given the anticipated RFP issuance by CUSA for the buses and related infrastructure. Administration is continuing to work with Civic Admin regarding the potential funding sources. And prior to a contract award, a report will be presented to the commission. Answer your question.
Okay, first we need a mover and a seconder to note and file. Moved by Commissioner Rod, seconded by Commissioner Little. Okay, Commissioner Little, have at her.
So my only question on this is, given all the funding uncertainties, how much work effort is actually being put into this at this point?
I mean, I can, so essentially, this is the result of a directive from council a number of years ago.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
And then subsequently, a number of years ago, the commission approved London Transit participating in the joint procurement with CUSA. So this has been going on. Obviously, there were delays during COVID, things got put on hold. And then there was a subsequent intentional delay because we knew there were a number of RFPs that had been issued. And we wanted to wait to see how they were awarded and how they were bid because the technology had significantly changed. So we were trying to make sure that what eventually got issued was based on what's currently available in the marketplace. So all that having been said, all the costs and work have already subsequently been approved and we were already in it up to our necks before we realized there's no funding, basically. So, I mean, this could very well, the RFP could be issued, we could choose a winner and we could come back to the commission and say, you know what, there's no money and we're not gonna award a contract. And unfortunately, the work's already been done, but we're in it. We're in it so far that there's really not an opportunity.
And that was actually my hope, is that the work is all done. It's just a matter of pulling off the shelf, hey, there's money, here you go, sort of thing, rather than a whole bunch of new work effort being put into place for something that we may not be different.
And the one important piece is the city has committed their share.
Yep.
So even if there isn't senior government funding, what we could potentially come back with, instead of buying 10 buses, we can only buy 5 because we've only got half the funding. So it wouldn't necessarily stop the pilot, it would just be on a smaller scale. So there still is opportunity to move forward, it just might not be as big as what we had initially anticipated.
Okay, that's great, thanks.
Other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna call the question, all those in favor? Okay, over to Mr. Wilson, specialized software update staff report number 9.
Thank you. Through the chair, staff report number 9 speaks to our new specialized server software implementation. It provides an update, same as of Friday last week. The report generally speaks for itself with respect to updates and information about training, go live, working through and refining parameters, customer trip notifications, customer feedback, correspondence, as well as vendor resources. And finally, phase 2 implementation, which will start once we have completed the signed off on phase 1. I can, however, add that today, for example, our phone queue was no longer full by 9:10 a.m. Therefore, customers would not be getting a busy signal and they would move directly into the queue. Our wait times in the queue to speak to an agent have reduced to an average of about 4.2 minutes. And our call times themselves have returned to an average of just under 2 minutes per call. These indicators are improving each day, as is our on-time performance. Today, by 4 o'clock, we were at 96.2% on time within a half hour of the scheduled pickup time. Trip efficiency with respect to reducing backtracking and our unaccommodated rate is just shy of 3%. Continuous improvement has been realized every day since the implementation, and we will continue to refine the new system incrementally to improve the customer experience further. Additionally, we'll continue to provide monthly updates at our scheduled meetings. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, and we move in the secondary note file. By Commissioner Collier, seconded by Commissioner Little. Okay, any comments or questions? I just want to say congratulations on the note, like going right into the queue. Well, that's good news. Thank you for giving us good news after. Like,
You're welcome.
that's good news, Commissioner Madden.
I agree. Thank you. And I think everybody, all of the users out there are actually very excited about this and seeing how it all works out. I would say the first 2 weeks were not like there was a lot of chaos out there because I received a lot of the emails and a lot of the phone calls. And I got the screenshot of someone having 1,084 redials on one time. I personally, on Saturday at noon, sat on hold. I was caller number 23 for 41 minutes. And that was Saturday at noon, and all I was trying to do was cancel trips for our holiday. So there was a lot of chaos out there, and people what was happening was people were suddenly started getting those phone calls or to confirm, and the times were off by an hour or told they've been canceled, and then they try to call in to get it sorted, and then we're in these excruciatingly long queues, and that was happening, and people didn't know. And it says in here that there was a message in November and December on the phone lines. I don't know anybody that heard that message, so I don't know where that message was, but I never heard it on any of the times I called in, and the people I've heard from, nobody knew it was happening. So all I would say is that communication-wise, when phase 2 comes out, I know you talked a little bit about communication here, but there's, in my opinion, there's so much more that has to happen because a lot of the times your riders, if you're handing out a flyer to a rider on the bus, they aren't necessarily the person that is booking that ride. So oftentimes it's a family member, a PSW, or an agency booking the rides. So although the people on the bus might get that flyer, the people involved in the whole system don't necessarily know what's happening. And so I know that in phase 2, we're going to send out a mailing, I understand. But I think people would also appreciate, I don't know, is there any way we can do a virtual workshop? But you don't have to have people be able to talk on it, but that there's a virtual workshop saying what's happening and how it's happening. Could a video be posted to our website or to social media or whatever, instructing people on how this next phase is going to work and the how-tos of it? Because I think it needs to reach a lot of people in a lot of different ways. I also think people look to the news, be it CBC, CTV, TV, radio. Can we put out something on there that's instructive, informative, commercialize it and letting people know what's happening? Because my worry is we're not reaching all the people, and we're now 17 days into this, and we're still waiting, I think, for that flyer on the bus that's gonna kind of help us understand what has happened. And so to me, that's kind of what's happening out there, and I just would like to see I don't know when, I guess the first question is, when is the next phase gonna happen? And then I see that you also are gonna ask for a set of people to test it out, and where are you getting the set of people from? Like, how are you designing that? And then what is the full communication thing? Because I think that's kind of what was the misfire.
So I can speak to a couple of those things. So first, the group of people, so our internal staff communicates with people every day with respect to their trips, their rides, whether they used Amble in the past, notifications, those sorts of things. So we've identified a handful of people that we believe would be great test subjects, noting that we know who they are. So that's a big piece of it. You asked about how we're going to communicate out, and it is going to be the mail out. I think what's important to recognize is that there's still just shy of 1,000 registrants, and it's hard to communicate with everybody the way that they need to be communicated with. So we're going to communicate the best way we can to them as well, which is, through that mail out. We're also going to be providing the same information to Large, Hutton House, Hub, Gale Brain Services, our major locations, so that they have a good understanding, because they also book trips, so does dialysis, so they'll have a good understanding of how that stuff works. We're going to continue to encourage people to sign up for notifications, so they will get up to date information, and to utilize the full aspect of the portal when it becomes phase 2. They will need to be set up for notifications as well, which is important. There was commentary about the notification on the phone. I can assure you it's there. However, if you recall, we also launched the smart card system, and there was significant time during the lead up to the point where our new system went in, where the smart card information was on there as well, through direction, because we needed to let people know that was happening. And then every year, there's also a 2-week period where we run all the information with respect to the holiday booking hours. So it wasn't always on there, but it clearly was on there. And I think, honestly, our ridership community would have had to have lived under a rock if they didn't know that this was happening based on all of the information that we've put out.
They didn't know when.
Put out to date, which is important. Phase 2, as it states in the report, and again in my summary here, is we've already started the background work on phase 2, but it's anticipated to start the process once we have completed and signed off on phase 1. So as it's stated in the report, we're continuing to work on parameters. So when you put a system like this in, you have your baseline parameters. Like, we don't want people on the bus for longer than an hour. We can't pick them up more than a half hour late. And we, on-time performance is the priority. Put all that in, and the gobbledygook happens in the background, and then it spits out a schedule, and it may not be the most efficient schedule, picking people up, and their rides are different. The greatest majority of the complaints that we received along the way here is because things have been different for people. We weren't good the first couple of days, specific. It's recognized in the report as well. But we also expected that to make it on that we were going to break some eggs. It wasn't going to be super smooth to begin with. That being said, we've carried over 1,000 people every day since the program started, Monday to Friday, which is consistent with the amount of rides we carried before. We've carried more people on Saturdays and Sundays than we did in the past based on some of the efficiencies that we realized. So there's some things to really be happy about. The notifications came out, they surprised us a little bit. And it's written in the report. They didn't come out exactly how we expected them to come out. And that was corrected as soon as we found out, which is important. And, there's still some things in the notifications that will come as we continue to move through it. As an example, there's the opportunity to get booking confirmations and booking change and booking cancellation notifications as well. So we've turned them all off to just have the baseline ones in there to date. So I think I answered 3 questions and touched on some other things there as well. And we recognize that communication is going to be a big piece. It's important in the next part to recognize that can't lead just shy of 9,000 people through the understanding on how to use the portal and Heartbeat. It's going to have to be a bit of a slower rollout. In this case here, and as the report spoke about, the phase 1, and we talked about it at the commission meeting prior to the last commission meeting prior to launch, wasn't anticipated to have a huge customer impact. The notification surprised us, as stated in the report, surprised me, and I own that one. They came out in a way that I didn't expect them to come out. The parameters, we kind of expected there would be some difficulties, and if you've seen in there, in the report, and it talked about, you know, being on the vehicle for longer than an hour, and the half-hour thing was essentially were kind of doubled in the parameter thing, and that's what caused that issue. Lacking those things, the notifications are what was causing everybody to call in. You know, there was a couple of days where we received over 600 more calls than we normally get, and we were listening to the exact same thing from everybody while other people are trying to make booking changes or make bookings. And that was kind of leading to that issue. You mentioned the flyer. The flyer was distributed on the buses this morning. It's an information flyer to tell people what has happened. It also provides a phone number and an extension where they can leave care and concern, suggestions, those sorts of things for us to gather, as opposed to bogging down the booking line, because primarily that was what was causing the biggest issue to begin with. So we've done what we can to mitigate that. While our staff, we had staff members working 60 hours a week that were pulling every day they could possibly work to throw absolutely every resource at it. Additionally, we increased our complement by 2 casual people leading into this to ensure that we had extra resources as well. So on a normal day when we'd have 3 or 4 call takers, we've had 5 or 6 and still been experiencing this backlog. So it's been to no lack of effort. Seeing the report there that we bragged about how amazing the staff did. And they did that in a somewhat abusive environment in some cases as well too. People were not kind to the staff in specialized or care on communication staff. It was a difficult ride there for a couple of days, and we understand it, that, you know, it did come with some change. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we get as much information as possible in the next phase.
Okay, one follow-up. Okay. The other thing on the end of this report is that, Boygo has not been able to deliver their contracted hours again. I see that you say you're gonna go and talk to, however it's worded, it says, whatever, that you're gonna go back to them and come up with a report again. Haven't we said that a whole lot of times already?
Through the chair, we have, and I'll tell you, the conversations have gotten increasingly more difficult over the last couple of years with them, based on some failures on their part. You'll see in the work plan that we are going to RFP this year for July of 2027. We're doing everything we can with respect to holding them accountable to not only service, but to provide information that they're not going to, so that we can do what we can to mitigate that. I can tell you that through conversations this week and including today, they've committed that they're going to be able to contract in short order. They have been shorter. There was we've had a day where, they've missed more than half a dozen runs, and that's a significant strain on the system. So you talk about exasperating the issue of on-time performance and buses coming late, things getting difficult for the customers. Well, you got to reallocate 30 trips a bus into buses that were already maximized. Things get really messy. So we are doing everything we can with respect to holding the vendor accountable. Is all I can tell you right now. I'm getting commitments from them, and I have seen some improvements with respect to, I don't want to say their effort level, because I've never questioned their effort. I questioned the results from their efforts. I've seen some changes over the last short period to make some improvements, and I don't know if they continue, in that, before the end of the first quarter here, that we're not going to be talking about them dropping a single run a day. Being said, I don't have a crystal ball, and it's reporting on what I've heard that somebody else could do. I don't disagree, and it's continued to be difficult for us as well. So ultimately, we want to provide access to people, and that barrier to having resources is a big piece of what's making it difficult.
Other comments or questions?
Quick question, for the phase 2 and for when we actually move to devices, is the user experience going to be the same on desktop versus tablet or phone? And will the user also have the option to actually receive those notifications push on their device of choice rather than give it out on a telephone call?
So through the chair, they can choose how they want to receive their notifications now via phone, text, or email. So the answer to that is yes. It is a web-based program, so they will be able to access it mobile.
But it'll render the same, basically. So it's not a custom app for phone or tablet. Okay.
It may look a little different on the phone.
Scratch,
but not a
yeah.
techie guy, but it's.
Yeah.
They'll be able to do it whole.
I'm just thinking from a continuity point of view. So,
Yep.
yeah.
So congratulations.
That really feels like a backhand. Great job, Sean.
No. This is.
I said it with no qualifications.
This is a significant implementation.
Yeah.
It is, it's a significant implementation. There are going to be bumps. Bumps happen. How you recover from those bumps is what's very important. I really appreciated your update. I love, it's just the operational metrics in there because it just shows how challenging it was for those first few days, and it's nice to see those are coming down. Maybe you're not quite at normal levels yet, but you're on the way. So I think it is really important to acknowledge the team that you had. Everybody worked really hard. They worked long hours. That's very, very important to get us to where we are right now. So that's a congratulations. Like, that's significant. I guess the question I would have now that we're a couple weeks in is, what is that user experience like now, like that end user, the rider experience like right now after 2 weeks in?
So, through the chair, it's not where we want to be yet.
Okay.
I mean, the on-time performance is still lower than it was in the past. We've expected them to adjust to some change. Kelly and I have had lots of conversations about, people generally got the same bus, at the same time, with the same driver. This system, based on the fact that it's trying to provide a lot of efficiencies, is saying that, David, the rider, is no longer with Bill, the driver. He could be on a different run today. That's created a lot of change stuff that I think people are going to have to get used to. The other thing is the inefficiencies in the last program made it so that you got your ride at 9 o'clock every day, and then you sort of rode by yourself a lot of times on a direct trip.
Yeah.
Where the policy clearly says we can pick you up up to a half an hour late, and it's a shared ride service. The program is maximizing the ability inside of the contract and inside of the understanding of the policy so that we can create more rides, which provides more access, which is essentially what we've talked about nonstop for years. So the customer experience is not where it needs to be yet, based on the fact that it's not completely efficient yet. It's not perfect. We're still working on some parameter stuff. I can tell you I tweaked another one today to see what it will do for tomorrow and the potential impact of the scheduling piece.
Yeah.
However, my impression of the customer experience is if we're carrying more people and we're still inside of the policy, ultimately we're going to provide more rides, which is better for the customer. Singular customer might say, this sucks. I now have to pick up Jackie along the way.
Yeah.
And I don't get there in 7 minutes anymore.
Yeah.
So to talking about measurables like earlier, that's a hard thing for me to measure. I would suggest that if we provide more trips inside of the policy with the same performance of on-time performance, then the measure of success is there. We talked about at the last meeting before the end of the year, it'd be great if we're doing a great job by April 1st. Like we had that conversation in this meeting. We're on the 15th day of it being in play right now. This has been a success, although it's been difficult and there are some bumps, without a doubt. I've taken a handful of beatings along the way, but ultimately it's going pretty well when you think of how big it is. And, to your point and to Chair's point as well, critical infrastructure stuff worked day one. People were able to call and book a trip. We turned on the computer, we could see the visibility of all the vehicles. We could communicate with the drivers. All the safety related things were in place, which are a big deal. And I could tell you that was what was causing me some sleepless nights. Like, what if we can't communicate with buses, right?
Oh, yeah.
That stuff all worked. So I could spend a lot more time talking about the things that were successes than I could about the things that have been difficult. I can tell you that.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I ask because I'm interested. I'm not trying to challenge here. I'm just very interested.
Come on in and hang out.
Thanks.
Phone.
Oh, God.
One follow. How long are you keeping extra people on the phone lines, or do you not need them anymore? Like you said, you had a couple extras on.
Through the chair, we are overstaffing right now just to make sure that we have enough people. And honestly, we're still dealing with a lot of people multiple times a day answering the same questions. I mean, we have a ridership that can sometimes require a little bit of extra help, and we still are overstaffed. And doing what we can. You'll see, the flyer that went out. It talks about a phone number with an extension if people want to leave questions, concerns, complaints, and then we get back to them as we can. We're trying to kind of funnel away from the booking line thing, so it doesn't impact those people anymore. But we have to have somebody available to do that. We're also gonna have to have somebody identified that's gonna work with people through the passenger portal piece as well. And it'd probably be best for us to have it, be isolated to a couple of people until we get real comfort with it. So, yes, and I don't see that ending immediately, that's for sure.
Okay, so those in favor to, note and file. Check in, that you are noting and filing.
I'm noting and filing, and smiling.
Pay attention. Okay, on to staff report number 10, over to Ms. Buckley for the voice of the customer survey.
This report sets out the results of the voice of the customer surveys conducted on the conventional and specialized services in November of 2024. Just a few highlights on the conventional service. The overall level of satisfaction with the service remained consistent with the previous year at 71%. The perceived value of the service brings to the community did increase by 5% over the previous survey, so that was nice to see. And on-time performance moved to the highest importance ranking of all the factors for the service, and also unfortunately received the lowest level of satisfaction. None of that's a surprise given the construction reports that the commission received every month last year talking about the issues associated with detours and on-time and schedule adherence. On the specialized service, the overall level of satisfaction with that service increased to 94% from the previous year's 91%. On-time performance also moved to the highest importance ranking on the specialized side. Again, specialized was also impacted by a construction project. Slightly different though in terms of the level of satisfaction with on-time performance, still sat at 84% on specialized, so not as significant as conventional. The service aspect receiving the lowest level of satisfaction in the survey was the ease of booking. That's good news because we're replacing the system, and that should hopefully we'll see that improve in next year's survey. As discussed in the report, a more detailed analysis and commentary will be provided in the customer service reports that the commission receives in February, where we combine the voice of the customer with all of our contacts and all of that. So with that, I'd be happy to answer the questions.
Okay, we need a mover and a second to note and file. Moved by Commissioner, seconded by Commissioner Collier. Any questions?
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Our net promoter score, do we have any demographic breakdown on that? Is there a particular population that is not promoted? I'm doing my part on Twitter, but I'm a wackadoodle demographic. But no, is it?
We have the raw data. I can certainly go back and dig into that. They didn't provide that as part of the summary.
It would be interesting to find that crosstab to say, hey, here's who we actually need to show some love to, right?
Yep.
Other comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor of letting and filing? So carried. Okay, back to Ms. Questioning again. This is agenda item number 11 of these staff reports. This is the London Transit Commission review.
Just to be short and sweet, the report provides an update on the London Transit review, including a copy of the report that was tabled with SPPC earlier this month. I believe the report speaks for itself. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I need a mover to note and file. Thank you. Commissioner Collier, seconded by Commissioner Little. Any comments or questions? Commissioner
I'm doing my best to be Commissioner Purple. Anticipate level of participation. Have we had any contact with them whatsoever? Okay, I just want that out there for the record.
In terms of what
Just like,
level of staff required? No, there's been
just like radio silence.
no discussion.
Okay, just putting that out there. Thanks.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor of writing and filing? Great, so carried. Okay, last stop report before we go in camera. This is over to Miss Burns with the super fun road construction update. I think we scared the new guy. He doesn't like my
Normally, we would get a break from the construction report in January. However, there continues to be a number of ongoing and new construction projects that have started across the city. So this report just provides an update on those projects. I just wanted to draw your attention to a couple of changes since the last update. So installation of the southbound rapid transit shelter at Ontario and King is currently underway and expected to be completed by tomorrow. The next location to be installed is currently scheduled to be the Wellington and King northbound stop within the downtown loop. However, recently, as today, we got information that they don't know when that will be starting. We're waiting for an updated schedule from NSACOM, who is the shelter provider, as well as the installers, due to weather delays, as well as the cold weather impacting the amount of time it's taking for curing. The time of work is taking longer than they originally had scheduled. So they're originally anticipating a week per location. Now they're saying it will be a minimum of 2 weeks. Weather dependent, could be longer if things are taking longer to cure. Well, we don't know when the work will be starting. We do know that when it does commence, there will be approximately 2 weeks impact at each location, like I mentioned, and the bus stops will have to be closed during that time. Additionally, the buses will have to exit the transit lanes and will be turning from the general traffic lanes using the regular traffic signals at those intersections. As we know more information, we'll provide the updates to the commission. Work has also begun on East London Link Phase 3B, the bridge at Highbury and Dundas. Currently, the impacts are fairly minimal, with some increased delays when traveling through the area, specifically on the Route 10, noting that we have detoured the Route 95 previously with the other work that was happening along Highbury. As work continues to progress at the Highbury, the stop Highbury north of Dundas will have to be closed. We will be able to relocate a temporary stop south of the intersection. I'm just noting that all of the other stops between Dundas and Oxford are already closed due to the work that's ongoing with East London Link Phase 3C. And finally, utility work started at Dundas and Waterloo on January the 13th. This work is scheduled to last until at least mid-March and has resulted in routes 2, 20, and 94 being detoured again along the same detour routing along King that they were previously during other construction during the downtown loop Phase 3 work. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I need a mover and a seconder to move in file. By Commissioner Little, seconded by Commissioner Madden, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor to note and file? Don't get up till you vote. Put your hand up, then you get up. Okay, thank you. All right, so carried. That concludes our public agenda. So we are going to move in camera. I require a mover and a seconder to consider consistent with the provision. Hold on, let me read it. This is with the provisions of section 239 of the Municipal Act. The commission will move in camera to consider the following. 1, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. 2, matters pertaining to litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. And 3, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Yes, I saw you, Commissioner Collier, who's seconding it. Commissioner Lowe, thank you. Okay, we are in camera. You can get up. Okay. So we're back into our public session. To report progress on 1, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. 2, matters pertaining to litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. And 3, matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. All right. Our next meeting is February 26th at 5 p.m. I need a mover and a seconder to adjourn. Thank you, Commissioner Reid. Seconded by Commissioner Rowe.